Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt from the West Coast in the California studio this morning. I hope you are doing well. I'm not wearing the eye patch I promised you because surgery was postponed from Friday to today. So I get my little procedure on my eyelid done today so I look like a pirate tomorrow. Long John Silver edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show tomorrow morning from California, then back to the Beltway. The world should have changed, as you know it, on Saturday. And not because the Browns lost yesterday, though that was pretty crushing too. And I'm praying for Kareem Hunt that it's not what I think it is, Achilles tendon tear. I'm praying that Kareem just has a calf strain that hurt a lot because he was crying as he went off. But I've known a lot of people with Achilles tears before, and that's sure it looks like they're shot by a gun and they go down and it hurts. And I'm just praying it's not that, but the down two offensive tackles, both running backs, dinged up. Baker Mayfield, second dislocation of his left shoulder, popped it back in twice in the game. They were just not good yesterday, and things went bad. So to everyone in Cleveland, Columbus, and throughout the Browns legions around the globe, let not your hearts be troubled. We play on Thursday night. Big Ben Chubb will be back. Maybe one or two of our offensive tackles will be back. More importantly, Jarvis Landry will be back. We'll be fine. But the world changed in August, and we found out about it yesterday, and I want you to listen to this. I rarely read an entire article, but this by Dimitri Sevastopoulos from the Financial Times. I stood up, shook my head, and said, "What?" It's a Sputnik moment, as my friend Captain Jerry Hendricks, retired from the United States Navy, has written about it in the past, and I'll tell you about it in a moment. But first, the article. China tested a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile in August that circled the globe before speeding towards a target, demonstrating an advanced space capability that caught U.S. intelligence by surprise. 5 people familiar with the test said that the Chinese military launched a missile that carried a hypersonic glide vehicle which flew through low-orbit space before cruising down towards its target. The missile missed its target by 24 miles, according to 3 people briefed on the intelligence. But 2 said the test showed that China had made astounding progress on hypersonic weapons and was far more advanced than the U.S. officials realized. The test has raised new questions about why the U.S. often underestimates military modernization in China. "We have no idea how they did this," said a 4th person. The U.S., Russia, and China are all developing hypersonic weapons, including glide vehicles that are launched into space on a rocket, but orbit the Earth under their own momentum. They fly at 5 times the speed of sound, slower than a ballistic missile. But they do not follow a fixed parabolic trajectory of a ballistic missile. Those go up and down in a parabola that can be calculated and deterred by SDI and similar strategic defense weapons. Not so the hypersonic missile. Taylor Favell, an expert on Chinese nuclear weapons policy, who was unaware of the test, said a hypersonic glide vehicle armed with a nuclear warhead could help China negate U.S. missile defense systems, which are designed to destroy incoming ballistic missiles. Hypersonic glide vehicles fly at lower trajectories and can maneuver in flight, which makes them harder to track and destroy, said Favell, a professor at MIT. Favell added that it would be destabilizing if China fully developed and deployed such a weapon, but he cautioned that a test did not necessarily mean that Beijing would deploy the capability. Right, Professor. Mounting concern about China's nuclear capability came as Beijing continues to build up its conventional military forces and engages in increasingly assertive military activity near Taiwan. Tensions between the U.S. and China have risen as the Biden administration has taken a tough tack on Beijing. It's actually just continuing the Trump-era programs, and I salute them for doing that. Michael Gallagher, Republican member of the House Armed Services Committee, said the test should serve as a call to action. Quote, "The People's Liberation Army now has an incredible capability to undermine our missile defenses and threaten the American homeland with both conventional and nuclear strikes," said Gallagher. Even more disturbing is that American technology has contributed to the PLA's hypersonic missile program. That means, as Gallagher knows, the Chinese have been stealing, via the PLA's intelligence operatives in the United States the technology to give it this advanced missile technology. U.S. officials in recent months have warned about China's growing nuclear capabilities, particularly after the release of satellite imagery showing that it was building more than 200 intercontinental ballistic missile silos. That's up in the Slave province of Xinjiang. China is not bound by arms control deals. It has been unwilling to engage the U.S. in talks about its nuclear arsenal and policy. Last month, Frank Kendall, U.S. Air Force Secretary, hinted that Beijing was developing a new weapon. He said China had made huge advances, including the potential for global strikes from space. He declined to provide details, but suggested that Beijing was developing something akin to the fractional orbital bombardment system that the U.S. deployed for part of the Cold War before abandoning it. If you use that kind of approach, you don't have a traditional ICM trajectory. It's a way to avoid defense and missile warning systems, said Kendall. In August, General Glenn Van Herk, leader of North American Space Defense Command, told a conference that China had recently demonstrated very advanced hypersonic glide vehicle capabilities. He warned that Chinese capability would provide significant challenge to my NORAD capability to provide threat warning and attack assessment. Two of the people familiar with the Chinese test said that the weapon could, in theory, fly over the South Pole. That would pose a big challenge for the U.S. military because its missile defenses are focused on the northern polar route. Hu Jin, editor of the Global Times, that's the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party, tweeted that Beijing would improve its nuclear deterrent to ensure that the U.S. abandons the idea of nuclear blackmail against China. The revelation comes as the Biden administration undertakes the Nuclear Posture Review, an analysis of policies and capabilities mandated by Congress that has pitted arms control advocates against those who believe the U.S. must do more to modernize its nuclear arsenal because of China. I guess that argument should be over. The Pentagon did not comment on the report. The Chinese embassy declined. One Asian national security official said the Chinese military conducted the test in August. China generally announced the launch of Long March rockets, the type used to launch the hypersonic glide vehicle into orbit, but conspicuously concealed the August launch. The security official and another Chinese security expert close to the PLA said the weapon was developed by the China Academy of Aerospace Aerodynamics. CAAA is a research institute under the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, the main state-owned firm that makes missile systems and rockets for the country's space program. Both sources said the hypersonic glide vehicle was launched on a Long March rocket, which is used for the space program. All right. First of all, to Dimitri, hat is off. You got the scoop, the Financial Times scoop. Now, this morning, Reuters has put out, China surprises U.S. with hypersonic missile test. Financial Times reports. Well, I read the Financial Times, so I read about this on Saturday, and I tweeted about it on Saturday, and I could not believe it got no coverage on the Sunday shows. I honestly, it's like Sputnik without anyone noticing that Sputnik was up there in 1957. Now, a lot is out there at the Hudson Institute by Captain Jerry Hendricks. The Sputnik Moment, Historic Lessons for Our Hypersonic Age. And Captain Hendricks wrote this. He's retired United States Navy a couple of years ago for the Hudson Institute, and I suggest you go get it if you want to know why this is important. But it basically means that they launch the missiles into space, then the missiles detach from the rocket, the Long March rocket, and they go their separate way on a glide path that is controlled from ground and can go up and down and sideways, predict evasive maneuvers. In the old days, a rocket would go up and come down in a predictable parabola. Now hypersonics from space means essentially, in one blow, all of our defenses have been defeated by the hypersonic missile. And so we're naked to a nuclear attack. Doesn't mean they're going to launch a nuclear attack, but we're back to mutual assured destruction. And Ronald Reagan's great dream now depends on Israel developing phased directed energy systems as soon as possible. More on this, but it ought to be leading every news story in America today. And if you haven't heard about it, it just means that, per usual, American media is clueless about the most important story. Everything changed. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Now. ¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Y lo siento mucho.
That's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
CNN is going crazy. Joe Rogan called them out the other day. Now they're sitting there trying to lie and say, no, we never called ivermectin a horse dewormer. So we'll play a couple audio clips for you because they sure as heck did. And quite frankly, in my opinion, they're complicit in the deaths. And I don't say this lightly. I don't say it just because I want to say something that's shocking on air. I sincerely believe it. I believe Facebook. I believe a lot of these big tech companies. I believe CNN, MSNBC. A lot of these people are complicit in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. I really do. For not getting the word out on therapeutics.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. So please do the right thing.
Now you're being patient again. We shouldn't be divided on the vaccine mandate. Now you're back to that because guess what? Your obstinance isn't working. Your mandates aren't working. Are there going to be booster mandates? Have you noticed nobody's talked about a booster mandate? Does a mandate only apply to round one? What about round two or three? It is the left who has politicized COVID, not us.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Go to salemnow.com.
How 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
2 million illegal aliens. You look at the 4 million people who resigned from their jobs last year. You look at the inflation. You look at everything to do with national security, with Afghanistan. Is there no point at which Biden becomes an albatross around the neck of the Democrats, or are they just too afraid to have the cackler in the Oval?
It's happened already. Look at Virginia.
Yeah.
Terry McAuliffe is losing to Youngkin in a race where Biden won by 10 points.
But hang on, Boris.
Okay?
Boris, it's not just that, Youngkin has a shot. Did you ever think that Terry McAuliffe would actually publicly state that the Democrat president is the reason that he might lose Virginia?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. When the Rundown with Hugh Hewitt comes out today, I will have our friend edit this Harley into one longer piece so that it's fully understood by people. The story in the Financial Times by Dimitri is he's just called Dimi on Twitter, D-I-M-I, but it's spelled D-E-M-E-T-R-I, Dimitri. The significance of this, very quickly, is that massive U.S. advantage in nuclear weaponry has been eclipsed by a single launch, just as it was assumed that we were so far ahead of the Soviet Union in 1957 when they launched Sputnik, and everyone looked up and said, oh my God, the Russians can hit us from space. Now we look up and we say, oh my God, the Chinese can launch super weapons. Just call them super weapons. They're the worst possible weapon you can have. It's flying at 5 times the speed of sound in space on a trajectory that can change, therefore not be anticipated and intercepted. So it's like putting nuclear bombs on the most advanced fighter plane you can, putting it up in the sky and moving it, or on a drone, and moving it left and right, up and down, defeating, in essence, slower moving projectiles from Earth sent to intercept it. We don't even have that capacity, but assuming we develop it, we actually have to get into concentrated energy weaponry, and we have to do so yesterday. But as I said when we go to break, if you want to get the full rundown, I'll get Jerry Hendricks on the show sometime this week, and I'll maybe Admiral Mark Montgomery, who first, Jerry and Mark introduced me to the concept of what hypersonic missiles were. And eventually I figured out they're cruise missiles that move at 5 times the speed of sound and can be changed effortlessly like a video game. And I hate to use that analogy because it's overused, but it's a video game, and we do not have the capacity to stop this. What we do have the capacity is to deter its use, because of our boomers, and it puts a brand new, accelerated emphasis on replacing the aging Ohio-class submarine that is the boomer out there. Because, look, worst case scenario, Dr. Strangelove scenario, we didn't even know about this. So the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, launches dozens and dozens and dozens of these things. We can't intercept a one of them. They hit the United States. They take out our capacity. Do we have enough to strike back? Do we? Do they hit, they're within 24 miles of a target. That pretty much wipes out the ability of the United States to launch a second strike from the ground. Do we have any bombers anywhere that can take off? If they wiped out the lanes on which the airports, whatever is the secret facility where we keep our stealth bombers and the new F-21 if it ever deploys, if they wiped out the airstrips that you need to launch. And therefore it comes down to whether or not you've got enough weaponry at sea to deter them from ever thinking about that. Now, China's not invincible. And according to the Financial Times this morning, NATO is expanding its focus to counter a rising China. Countering the security threat from the rise of China will be an important part of NATO's future rationale, the alliance chief Stoltenberg, who got along pretty well with Trump, not certain he gets along well with Biden, making a significant rethink of the Western alliance's objective that reflects the U.S.'s geostrategic pivot to Asia. Now, I hope Jens Stoltenberg is correct about that and that NATO will go along with it. China is not invincible. From the Washington Post this morning, Eva Dow. China's power shortages, housing struggles, put the brakes on its economy. And it was just reported that it only grew by 4.9% last year. Well, that's more than we did, but it's not what they need to do to feed 1.3 billion aging people. They have aging demographics. They got huge health problems. They have huge ecosystem problems. But the development of the PLA's capacity in space and this hypersonic should haunt you today. And you should be asking, from Virginia, where early voting continues, and I hope you're voting for Glenn Youngkin, and I'll talk about that in the next segment, why. Whether it is a call to your congressman or your congresswoman, your senators, say, get serious. That $3.5 trillion boondoggle you're out there, will you throw some money at hypersonics, please, and at phased array energy weapons? Can we please get serious and respond like Eisenhower responded to Sputnik, or we are going to be a vassal state of China, because they will possess overwhelming force shortly, because for 12 years, or maybe even since 9/11, we have not been focused on their military might. In the last 4 years, we began to awaken to it under President Trump. We were completely oblivious to it under President Obama, though he talked about the shift to China and the shift to the Pacific. Now we have to really act as though a predator is upon us. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
But yet our country is controlled by Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and BioNTech. And therefore, we're not even allowed to have a conversation about ivermectin. But the few people that are free speech warriors like Joe Rogan, he does not let up. Cut 55, and then we'll go through all 3 cuts here. And this is, by the way, if you have not listened to this podcast discussion with Sanjay Gupta, it's incredible. Because maybe Sanjay Gupta thought that they were going to have a nice little conversation about why people need to wear masks. I don't know what he was thinking going on Joe Rogan's show. But Joe is mad, and good for Joe. Joe Rogan asked Sanjay Gupta, does it bother you that CNN lied about me? Cut 55.
Does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before coming on your podcast.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
They did. I watched.
Gorgeous. I want to frame that. Because because we see this little shriveling of a weak human, Sanjay Gupta. I should have asked. I didn't know. You understand that these media reporters have never been called out before? I think Sanjay Gupta was there to promote a book. I don't think it's doing very well after that. I think he has a new book, like COVID War Zero or something. I really think it's called World War COVID. I think that's the name of the book. And so CNN, he's the medical guy there. And so Joe says, you're the medical guy there. What do you mean? And Joe Rogan doesn't give up. He's a dog with a bone, everybody. He says, wait a second. It should bother you. It's a lie on your network, and it's your conscience of it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Religion. It's not just about saying I have a right in this country to not have the government not allow me to go to church, but also that the government cannot compel me to participate in any sort of event, including a vaccine, by the way, that goes against my sincerely held religious beliefs. And so it should just be a matter of course that if you have a conscious objection, then you can say, I, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew, as any sort of religion, I mean, this covers all religions, by the way, all faiths, all sincerely held beliefs, you should be able to say, I decline to be coerced into participation. But what we're seeing is that a lot of employers are not only requiring a lot of information for people to say, well, you have to justify your religious exemption. We're also seeing that they want this so-called, what they're calling an interactive process. That's basically an interrogation. I have clients right now that they have filed for a religious exemption on the basis of we're pro-life, that's what the Bible teaches, and I cannot take this vaccine. And the Human Resources Department, from the legal counsel of these employers, want to sit down and basically interrogate them and say, is this really a sincerely held religious belief? And they're using this as a pretext to try to deny religious exemptions. It's absurd, and I hope that when there are more lawsuits filed, like just today, in Texas, United Airlines was forbidden from enforcing their vaccine mandate against employees who are claiming a religious exemption. So we're already seeing that the courts are protecting this, but hopefully it'll be more than just Texas.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Salem Now.
I was taking horse
in that same school
are now identifying as transgender.
Children taught at age 5 they can create their gender identity, and it's being celebrated.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Every cell of their body that has a nucleus is male or female.
We've now seen parents losing custody of their children if they don't go along with this.
We've all been created XY or XX, so that means there's only two genders. And so really the battle is against the creator.
Welcome back, America. Good Monday morning to you. It's Hugh Hewitt, California studios for today and tomorrow. I will be getting a little slicing and dicing. I may be wearing an eye patch tomorrow. I don't know. If I look like Long John Silver, watch anyway. You can always watch on YouTube. You can also always listen on the podcast, wherever it's found. We watch on the YouTube channel of the Hugh Hewitt Show as well. I'm in California for 2 days. I'll be back inside the Beltway on Wednesday. Are Virginia black voters energized or tired? McAuliffe brings in big guns to motivate a crucial Democratic constituency. The great news is that the feeling in Virginia is that Glenn Youngkin has momentum and Terry McAuliffe is spent. The feeling in Virginia is that Terry McAuliffe is a old, already used up force, relying on old and already used up canards, and he's not doing anything about education. Later this morning, I'll have a new editorial at the Washington Post on what Glenn Youngkin has promised to do. Two big promises. One, that parents' input into schools will grow dramatically, and two, that anyone who deserves accelerated classes gets accelerated classes. Unlike Ralph Northam in the Department of Education and Terry McAuliffe, who believe that accelerated classes in math should only be available in the 11th and 12th grade, shutting out higher achieving students with particular gifts in math and science from taking the accelerated courses they've got to have to be ready for places like MIT and UCI. On equity grounds. It actually makes no sense at all not to track those, and they would not include me, who are extraordinarily gifted in math and science. And so they're going right into that in Virginia. And the early voting in Virginia continues through the last Saturday. We have another week of early voting to get through. And so the election's on November the 2nd, I believe. So right up until the Saturday before the November the 2nd, which is next Saturday. 2 Saturdays, actually, right? Today's the 18th, so that it will be the 25th. And no, I guess it will be the last Saturday. It'll be the 23rd, early voting. I'll double check that. So get out and early vote. Republicans are doing very well in the early voting. Democrats are they're done. Joe Biden has disappointed them. African Americans especially have been disappointed by paralysis, the inability of Joe Biden to get anything done. We've actually seen with our own eyes how, well, without energy Joe Biden is, and how often cantankerous appears in his occasional glimpses in public. He's shouting at people. And if you're thinking about get off my lawn, old man, that's exactly what we've got for president right now, and it's not really energy central. And Terry McAuliffe isn't much better, and the videos of him dancing in front of empty rallies is certainly enervating. The good news for Republicans is Glenn Youngkin is everywhere, tirelessly out there with great enthusiasm at the grassroots, great early voting efforts to get people to the registrar. If you don't know where to early vote, just go to Early Voting Virginia and name your county. In Google, Early Voting Virginia and name your county. Farquhar, Loudoun, Arlington. It will tell you where to go to and get your vote done now. Get it in. I've already voted in Virginia for Glenn Youngkin, and we really need a Youngkin win there. I'll tell you a little bit later. But I want to go back to China now. Roth Douthat had a column yesterday and finished the rundown. Roth Douthat had a column yesterday. No time for China. It points out that the new Bond movie has Daniel Craig in his last turn as Bond, and that in the 5 Bond franchise arc of movies that Daniel Craig is featured in, China hasn't existed except for brief backdrops of Shanghai and Macau. brief. No bad guys from China. Why is that? They want the Chinese gate. They want the Chinese rear ends and the Chinese seats watching Chinese screens and creating movies. Hollywood is sold out completely to China, like the NBA. And so they're not going to exactly be making movies like Dr. Strangelove, where the bad guy is General Secretary Xi instead of Khrushchev. It's a very bleak situation. And if you vote for a Democrat, you're voting to get bleaker and to be eclipsed. Any Democrat in any race, anytime, anywhere, does not care about Democratic spending. When the congressionals come around next year at this time, I'll be telling you from day one, don't vote for any Democrat. We cannot afford to have our defense budget continually cut. Now inflation is riding the four horsemen of the inflation apocalypse are abroad. We can't afford to have that anymore. Now, I want to tell my new affiliate. We had a new addition to the board today, the Hugh Hewitt Show, with more than 400 affiliates covering the country coast to coast on YouTube, on 2 podcasts, the Hugh Hewitt Show, Highly Concentrated Hugh, and the Interview with Hugh Hewitt, and of course on the daily broadcast that can be carried around. And if you're a Universe member, if you subscribe to the Universe over at HughHewitt.com, you get every minute of 21 years of Hugh Hewitt shows. But I have a new affiliate, WLNL The Bell, which is 1000 AM in Horseheads, New York. Welcome, WLNL The Bell. I am grateful that you're listening this morning. You say, who is this guy? Well, you don't know who I am, but I do a serious news program. I have fun doing it. I have fun with my guests like Salena Zito coming up with the Injury Report from Pittsburgh. And I have Bret Baier on at the bottom of today's show talking about his grant book. I'll do everything. But when something comes along like this, a national security story, I'll treat it with the depth and respect that it deserves because it is a game changer. And we're on the wrong end of that game change. We are way behind on hypersonics. Now, at the last year and a half of the Trump administration, Mike Pompeo and Robert O'Brien teamed up together. Robert O'Brien was the National Security Advisor, President Trump's fourth. Michael Pompeo, his second Secretary of State, former CIA director, to kick the rear end of everyone involved over at DOD. Mark Esper was a failure at DOD, but there were some people who were taking this seriously at DARPA and other places. And there are now 7 kinds of hypersonic missiles in development in the United States. 7 different from, I believe, 4 different companies. They will get it down to 3, and they will figure out how we will pass China in 5 years with money and attention. But we can't make up a scientific gap that develops because our schools are failing. And that's why, especially why in Virginia, where education is the #1 issue, Glenn Youngkin needs you to get out there and vote for him so we stop making education a political basketball for teachers' unions about their retirement benefits and for crits, for critical legal studies. That's why we need, for example, the Alliance Defending Freedom. I'm running a fundraiser right now for the Alliance Defending Freedom, which sponsors this show, and I sponsor this fundraiser over at HughHewitt.com. If you're serious about education reform for any reason whatsoever, and you hate the fact that left-leaning groups come in and try and stop education reform, try and require students, ACLU filed a lawsuit in Loudoun County over the weekend, obliging teachers to use the pronouns selected by their students. Okay, so what's your #1 goal on every other day in high school? It's to screw with the teacher's head. So even if you're not gender fluid, if you just want to screw with the teachers, I'm a she today, Mr. Jones, I'm a she today, Ms. Constantine, I'm using teachers from my past. Hey, Mr. Karen Bauer, please call me they today. They'll be obliged to under the ACLU's lawsuit. That's what we're up against. Now, the Alliance Defending Freedom will fight for the rights of teachers to be free of this nonsense and to express their own beliefs and to be able to speak out against modernity's most excessive idiocies. They will also protect the religious liberty of every student, the religious liberty of every teacher, and they do so successfully. And if you want education reform to move forward, if you want education to remain serious, please go over to HughHewitt.com and click on that ADF button at the very top and be as generous as you can. It's the only fundraiser I've got going right now, even though the news out of Haiti is terrible. I've done my bit for Haiti this year with Food for the Poor. I am now doing our bit for America's kids by saying, please support Alliance Defending Freedom. Speaking of Haiti, prayers for the 17 American missionaries kidnapped and their family members. Mission trip. You know, how many mission trips to Haiti do you know about? My niece's mother-in-law runs an orphanage in Haiti, goes back and forth all the time. I know churches that are down in Haiti all the time. Dale has been back and forth to Haiti, one of the pastors we support. A gang has kidnapped 17 people. It is the gang considered the country's most dangerous gang. Bad news there. Very bad news. Group of 17 in Canada, and there's a Canadian. 16 Americans, 1 Canadian. 5 children among those 17 people kidnapped in Haiti, according to the Wall Street Journal. It's a very dire situation. Haiti is devolving into Somalia in our hemisphere. And Joe Biden is saying, can I have some crackers with my soup today? So we're in trouble. We're really in trouble, both here and abroad, from Haiti to China and everywhere in between. At home, the supply chain crisis in U.S. ports, disruption on top of disruption. The Financial Times reports this morning. Behind the energy crisis, fossil fuel investment drops and renewables aren't ready, from the Wall Street Journal. I think we all know that Pete Buttigieg has been out for 2 months on parent leave as he and Chase adopted a baby. And their adopted baby triggered Pete Buttigieg 2 months off. I ran at Huntington Beach on Saturday. Trundled is the better word. Did my 10 miles at Huntington Beach on Saturday morning. And the line of freighters stretched far, far past Catalina, as far as the eye could see. Because in 8 months under Joe Biden, Long Beach Port and the associated facility of San Pedro is completely bollocksed up. Now, on one side of me, I'm not unhappy. I own an investment. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I invested in a startup called Envase, E-N-V-A-S-A-E, which is a logistics superpower, and they're going to sell out, and our little bit of money will make a little bit more of money when they do, because Envase is a software program that fixes all this. So I look at that and I see profits. But I also look at that and I see idiocy in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Transportation, which has been leaderless because Pete Buttigieg wanted to set an example for America of a same-sex couple each taking their leave. Great, we have that example. I actually didn't need that example from the Department of Transportation. I know that those benefits are available to same-sex couples. All I know is what I saw at Huntington Beach, an endless line of ships. What happened on the market on Friday? Let me bring you up to speed. Brought to you by Birch Gold. And more people, as Brian Westbury told my audience on Thursday night in Atlanta when I was down there with Brian and Alfredo Ortiz of the Job Creators Network, and with Herschel. It was a non-political event at the Atlanta History Center, but we spent our time talking about the economy. Brian Westbury just talked about this. This is not transient inflation. It's permanent inflation. It's going to be at 5 and 6 and 7%. And the market knows that and is adjusted. The Dow went up 382 points on Friday. The S&P went up 23, and NASDAQ went up 73. The price of gold this very morning is up to $17.63. Remember, it was at $17.50 last week. It's up to $17.63. The 30-year Treasury was reported over the weekend to be back above 3%. Now, maybe you'll find, if you use andrewandtodd.com, maybe you'll find a little bit lower. But a lot of you are diversifying into gold and commodities and real estate. Brian Westbury was very blunt in response to a question, what do you do about inflation? Gold and silver, commodities, and real estate. And he doesn't really trust commodities. He believes, by the way, the boom in stocks will continue for 10 to 12 months. After that, no. They'll get topped out. So please listen to Brian. Go get some gold from HughGold.com or text my name, Hugh, to Birch Gold. Hugh, to text it to 474747. That's Birch Gold via HughGold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. No running today, except over to the dermatologist, but ReliefFactor.com anyway. This is that moment in the morning show when I always take my Relief Factor for the day's events that are ahead, and I'm taking these right now. It's going to be a long day today. Since I'm on the West Coast, I'm up early. I'll get another nap in today. But ReliefFactor.com keeps me going. Whether it's the dermatologist, I'll be at the Nixon Library tonight with Bret Baier talking about his magnificent book, To Rescue the Republic. It's a story of Ulysses S. Grant culminating in Reconstruction, and I think he actually does a better job on Reconstruction than Ron Chernow did in his magnificent Grant. So it's a long day, but Relief Factor will keep me in the game. I carry in Kirkman as Veritron Omega. 10 miles at the beach on Saturday, just all sorts of errand running today, and I will be up early again tomorrow. That's what you do when you're on the West Coast hours. So I urge you, go to ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. I come back with Salena Zito, who's focused in on the Virginia gubernatorial race just like I am. Get out there and vote early for Glenn Youngkin. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
But can you share with us an overview of how Mark Zuckerberg and his wife directed literally hundreds of millions, I think $419 million into communities, into areas that Biden really needed, and how that plays out.
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan donated out of their own personal resources, not through they have a private foundation that they normally would do something like this through, but they went through they use their own private resources, and they funneled those resources into a little sleepy Chicago-based nonprofit called Center for Technology and Civic Life. This had nothing to do with conventional campaign finance, like a donation to the DNC to blanket the airwaves with a pro-Democrat Party message. This was money that was funneled through this little 501c3, which is supposed to be nonpartisan organization, directly into the election process. It's as if the DNC was somehow able to insinuate itself into local election offices and kind of take over the running of the on-the-ground realities of the election from within these local election offices, that even though a lot of the people that work there have their own partisan leanings and whatnot, the vast majority of them are serious professionals who try and do the best job that they can. But the activists who came along with CTCL money were not so objectively inclined.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I have to get your reaction to Peppermint Patty, who was at the podium, who was explaining why, high gas prices, Boris, it's not a problem everywhere, really. Cut 5.
For a range of issues, and we should talk about those, that the American people are, of course, impacted by rising prices of gas in some parts of the country, not all.
Well, Boris, it's okay then, because it's only some parts of the country. Which parts of the country, Boris?
Oh, yeah. So there's that 50. Remember, Obama thought there was like 62 states. So it's probably those 12 states or whatever it was. Those are the parts of the country they're referring to.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should.
Ambush. I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That clip is the clip that will decide the Virginia election. My guest, Salena Zito, columnist at the Washington Examiner, the New York Post, and at other places around the country, wrote a column about this election. Good morning, Selena. How are you?
Good morning, Sunshine. How are you?
I'm not so sunshiny. The Browns got blown out in Cleveland yesterday, and everybody's banged up. I think Kareem Hunt tore an Achilles. Both of our tackles are out. Nick Chubb is hurt. I'm just grumpy.
I got stuck in Steelers traffic, but that's all I got. That's as close as I got to watching them.
Okay, well, I loved your column. I want to play this clip again. It's from this is Terry McAuliffe in the key last governor's debate talking to Glenn Youngkin.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
What is the significance, Selena? I've read your column, but explain it to people who haven't yet gone to selenazito.com and read it.
Well, I think the whole key to this entire race is one word, and that's overreach. And I think that that is the sort of chaos and power grabbing that the voters exactly voted against with Biden, and yet they are seeing with all of the Democrats. And I think that listening to Virginia voters, That is the problem McAuliffe has, and it's the problem that Democrats are facing across the country in these off-year elections. Virginia and New Jersey are the larger races, but even in small municipal races, I think that Democrats are going to have a big problem in a couple of weeks.
Yesterday, Jeff Greenfield did a piece for Politico that lists the greatest gaffes in election history, in modern American election history. Let's play this one again from Terry McAuliffe.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Now, Michael Kinsley, the great editor, defined a gaffe as saying out loud that what you're thinking, but what you should not say. Why shouldn't he say that out loud, Selena?
Well, because it goes to the heart of everything that voters have discovered about what the power that school boards and, in extension, the power that teachers' unions have over their children. This is something that they sort of didn't pay attention to until the pandemic, and their students are at home, or their children or their grandchildren, and they're realizing that they have ceded control to their children, and it's not something that they want to do, and it's become this cultural phenomenon. The parents are understanding, hey, you're with our kids more than we are. You're not going because, kids are in school for 8 hours a day.
Yeah,
you do not have the right to have this power over what you teach them.
When my parents ceded control to the nuns, even though Sister Benedicte in third grade was 85 years old, and I am not kidding, and even though Miss Bocone in the fourth grade was just a killer and was never going to win a teaching award, there were not Miss Bocone, Miss LaRock. LaRock was a rock in fifth grade. There were some great teachers like Sister Timothy Burns, and they gave over, and none of those teachers were trying to politicize math.
Right.
They weren't trying to get you to do anything other than learn how to read, write, and do your arithmetic. That's a traditionalist view of a teacher job, and they worked endlessly for nothing. Catholic school teachers have done that as a calling, as a vocation for as long as Fred Hoover is still my English teacher from high school. I still stay in touch with Fred. And Fred has been doing this forever, and they do so for the right reasons. But in Virginia, the politics of education has really turned parents against bureaucrats and teachers with good reason.
Absolutely. Your children this is one of the things I think that our culture has our cultural curators have sort of misread, in that they do not understand how sick people are of politics being involved in everything that we do. It's not just in our entertainment. It's not just in our sports. It's now in our children's schools. And people have just had enough of it, and they're putting their foot down, not just in Virginia, but across the country.
Have you noticed that none of the NFL games have been riven by politics? There is no Colin Kaepernick. There is no kneeling. They got it out of the way early, and the players are aware that they were damaging their future. The NBA has shut up. Major League Baseball is very, very regretful of having screwed Atlanta over. I think the left may not have woken up to this, but the center left has sure figured out the way to tick off voters is to do what Terry McAuliffe has done in Virginia, which is cut out parents.
Right. But I think in terms of how it has impacted people, I think the overreach has trickled down into our culture, and I think that the tide is going in the other direction. It was a slow tide; it took a while, but people have finally become wise to it, and they want no more of it.
Well, I've just tweeted out Selena's new column. You can read everything Selena writes if you just go over to selenazito.com. You don't have to follow her at the Post and at the Washington Examiner or wherever else she writes. Just go over to selenazito.com. Thank you, Selena. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Straight ahead. Stay with me.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Bursch Gold Group.
not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Joe Rogan is a good man. Joe Rogan's a fun person. I don't agree with him on everything. I have to say this every time because I get these emails from people. Charlie, how dare you? Like, what are you, Greta Thunberg? Look, Joe Rogan has a different worldview on certain things, but he loves freedom and he loves his country. He's willing to speak out about it. He has been phenomenal on the lockdowns, on the vaccine, on masks. I had a chance to meet Joe Rogan about a month ago in Los Angeles. And Joe Rogan, right when I met him, we posted it on Instagram, and the picture we said has ivermectin boys, and it went totally viral because you're not allowed to say that. And so Joe Rogan, of course, took ivermectin after getting the Fauci virus and made a rapid turnaround.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Why don't we talk about Southwest Airlines, which has been in the news very recently.
Basically, Southwest had to cancel over 1,000 flights, and they claimed initially that it was for the weather, and a lot of them were actually out of Florida, and ironically, I was actually out speaking at a conference in Miami, and it was beautiful weather when I flew out on Sunday. So this was, of course, not weather-related. They're trying to claim that it wasn't for pushing back against the vaccine mandates. But what a lot of people are speculating, and what I think there is some merit to, is that there is a group now of pilots who are saying we are refusing to be coerced by our employer to take the vaccine. And in fact, the Union of Southwest Pilots has filed a lawsuit in the Federal District of Texas. What's interesting, Eric, is that traditionally conservatives have been kind of anti-union for a lot of really good reasons.
Oh, yeah.
And to say that, we are coerced into having to give union dues, and then they, of course, funnel those dues to Democrat candidates or things like that. But this shows the power of collective bargaining. This group of pilots is now pushing back and saying we will not be coerced by our employer into unilaterally modifying our employment conditions to take a vaccine that could, by the way, have a lot of negative influence. I mean, there was a friend of mine who was even saying the other day that a friend of his, who is a pilot for a different carrier, has some anecdotal evidence to say that there have been some pilots who have had blood clots or, the myocarditis, other things at altitude. And so there are a lot of pilots that are very concerned about that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
This most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
The mayor is backtracking.
So it's happening. People have to stand up. These people understand that they have to get reelected. And sometimes we just have to remind them who's in charge. And we, the people, are in charge. That is our system. It is a democratic republic. We all get to participate, but we elect people that we trust. We put them in office, and we trust them to keep us safe. We trust them to abide by the Constitution and to keep us free. And when they do not do that, we have to kick their butts out of office. But the important thing is, as voters, you have to always be mindful of freedom. You have to always be mindful of freedom. Quite frankly, I do believe that it's one of the advantages that I have as a black conservative. You can call me Uncle Tom sellout, whatever. There's no affirmative action plan in heaven. All I have to do is worry about Jesus. I don't have time to worry about you. But I do believe, as black conservatives, I compare us to runaway slaves, because I often say our thoughts are consumed with freedom. That's what happens oftentimes with black conservatives, is we find out and we get this piece of information, we get this piece of history, and we're like, what? The federal government or the Democrat Party did what to enslave us? What did they do? And then you just start looking for that. I also believe it's an advantage that people of faith have, whether you're Christian, whether you're Jewish.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Go ahead and tell me that you voted for Joe Biden and you can't believe what's happened to America. Jimmy Carter is going to be a resounding success compared to this guy. Listen to Circleback Psaki attempting lamely to explain away Ron Klain supporting the charge that all of this crisis in America with the empty shelves and surging inflation and the supply chain crisis is a high-class problem, and it's actually a good sign. You know, people, it's a good thing.
Why would Ron Klain tweet that, and would you agree that that's a little bit tone deaf?
Do you think 2 tweets means more? I'm just curious. So just for context, what Ron Klain retweeted was a tweet from the former chairman of economic advisors, Jason Furman, where he said, for full context, which I think is important, most of the economic problems we're facing, inflation, supply chains, are high-class problems. What he went on to say is, we wouldn't have had them if unemployment rate was still 10%. We would instead have had a much worse problem. So I think the point here is, well, there are some critics who are saying what some of these critics are saying is we don't know if they're saying that what they thought was great was when the unemployment rate was double what it is today, or when people were locked in their homes and therefore gas prices were lower. We're at this point because the unemployment rate has come down and been cut in half, because people are buying more goods, because people are traveling, and because demand is up, and because the economy is turning back on.
Give 'em the old razzle-dazzle, razzle-dazzle 'em. That's Jen Psaki.
On YouTube and at Rumble.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt in the West Coast studio today. I'll be at the Nixon Library tonight wearing my eye patch. But Bret Baier is in town. I hadn't originally intended to go up and interview Bret. He is out talking about his brand new book, this one right here, To Rescue the Republic, Ulysses S. Grant. And so I offered, and Bret accepted, to go up and do the interview, though I might look like Popeye when I'm done with my eye surgery. I'm joined by Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News every single morning in my email inbox. I get a lot of junk, and then I get Punchbowl News, which I always open and read. Good morning, Jake. How are you?
I'm well, Hugh. How are you?
Good. Let's do a little promotion. How do people get Punchbowl News? Because it really is a fine, fine summary. We'll talk about it in just a moment, what I learned this morning.
I appreciate that, Hugh. So you can go to punchbowl.news or punchbowlnews.com. Both will take you to the same place. And just put in your email address. It's free every morning, always free every morning. And premium subscribers get 3 editions a day, plus a bunch of other stuff that we do in the political content department. We are now, I guess, 10 months old, and we are very excited, and we're growing big time over the next couple months. And so, you should definitely everyone should subscribe.
What do you make of Axel Springer springing the surprise on Politico.com? They're going to put it behind a paywall. Now, I don't expect you to comment on this.
I'm happy to talk about it.
Go ahead.
I worked at Politico for 11 years. It was my job. It was a big part of my life. I am not surprised. I think it's a shame for some people, but there's a market that will pay. I mean, I think that's what we're seeing. People will pay for good political reporting, and Axel Springer thinks people will pay for Politico, and I wish them well in that. It's not definitely not surprising to me, given what they've done to Business Insider, which is almost 100% behind the paywall.
Yeah, I am not surprised either, but I expect Axel Springer will bring it back to the center. I believe that Politico, and you don't have to comment on this, has gone pretty hard left, especially your old digs, and that very objective approach to politics you and Anna and John have brought over to Punchbowl reflected this morning. And here's what I learned this morning in my Punchbowl news email. I was unaware of the Manchin letter to Schumer, and you report that House Democrats were too. Would you tell us what that letter was and why I didn't know about it and why House Democrats are upset about it?
Well, this has been out for a while. Actually, Politico did break the letter story a long time ago. Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer had a kind of secret agreement, so to speak, basically where Manchin said he would only spend $1.5 trillion on the reconciliation bill. Here's what I would say, Hugh, and I think this, and I think a lot of people are beginning to realize it. A majority is only as strong as its weakest link, right? Its most conservative or most liberal member. And Joe Manchin is the linchpin for everything Democrats want, and so people can demonize him, which is fine. One is allowed to have opinions about lawmakers, but anything they want to get done has to go through Joe Manchin, and that's just something they need to become more and more comfortable with.
So there is a $1.5 trillion cap. It's called the Manchin cap. Now, I missed the letter. I missed the whole story. I knew that Joe Manchin has always been upset with the idea of $3.5 trillion, but he voted to advance it. So I missed the entire story. I read about it in Punchbowl. Why did they not just from the beginning deal with it? If you got 50 votes and 50 against you, you've got to have Manchin. Manchin says $1.5 trillion, and then Sinema underneath that cap has her own demands, as do every other Democrat in the Senate.
They should have been. I agree. I thought it was crazy for them to vote for a $3.5 trillion budget, not because it was $3.5 trillion, but because they never were going to $3.5 trillion. So I don't know why they got themselves all amped up for that. But the left wanted $6 trillion or $10 trillion. So, that's kind of the reality they were facing, and now they have to deal with that. They have to deal with the fallout from that.
Yeah, to me, they inflicted upon themselves a defeat. An unnecessary defeat. They got way ahead of their front line. The furthest they would, if think in World War I terms, I hate to use battle analogies, but it's like going over the top into no man's land, knowing you're going to get slaughtered, and then going back to the line that you should have just built your fortification at, which should have been $1.5 trillion. Now, yesterday's news, or Saturday's news in the Financial Times, Jake, about the hypersonic missile that China launched.
Yep.
I began the show with a half hour about that because that's a game changer. That's a Sputnik moment. Jerry Hendricks wrote about the possibility of that in the Hudson Institute 2 months ago, but now it's happened. They've circled the globe with a hypersonic missile, and it's a Sputnik moment. Any chance that any of the Democrats will realize this has got to change their priorities?
No. And remember, there was we talked about this back a couple months ago. There is a bipartisan China-related bill that came out of the Senate, Chuck Schumer and Todd Young, which was at some point called Endless Frontiers Act. Now it's called USICA. House Democrats have basically thrown that in the trash bin, said they have no interest in it, and they've not taken any action on it. So, no, the answer is they're not going to do that, and they're going to keep on trucking right here and keep on going through their agenda, and I don't think there's going to be anything that's done. I mean, listen, maybe at the end of the year there's been some talk of putting China-related legislation on the NDAA, which the National Defense Authorization Act has passed every year for 60 years, so that we have to imagine it's going to pass again. There's some talk of that, but not much in the way of action.
You see, to me, it is a Sputnik moment, and that I'm not talking about sanctions on China. It's an arms race because we don't have anything that can beat a hypersonic glide nuclear weapon. We don't. We simply do not have that. Their long march rockets can't be knocked out at launch, and they get up there and they release these things, and you can't track them and you can't stop them. So we just have to increase our deterrent, which is the Columbia-class nuclear submarine, which is way behind schedule and underfunded. It's the easiest thing in the world. It's an easy win for Democrats to plus up from $1.5 trillion to pay for the Columbia. Does no one think in the obvious terms that national defense might make a winning point for? I hope they don't, but on the other hand, as a patriot, I hope they do.
Yeah, I think there's already a pretty big aversion to upping defense spending in the Democratic Party for a million reasons. And again, it goes back to what we're talking about with 3-seat or 4-seat majority in the House and a 0-seat majority in the Senate. That it just becomes difficult to have those discussions and to get into those arguments.
You know, if I were Kristen Sinema, and I'm not, and I've never met her, if I would make my demand defense related, she would instantly propel herself into national prominence as a Democrat who was serious, in the way that Sam Nunn once was. There is no Sam Nunn in the Senate right now, right? There is no hawkish Democrat to whom you can turn for defense advice. Am I right about that?
There are a few. I mean, Jack Reed, who's the chair of the Armed Services Committee, is one of those people. There are people, I think, who are well-respected in the defense realm. The issue is just raising defense spending. Increasing defense spending is just a very difficult political fight for Democrats.
Jack Reed is understood to be a serious man, as is Angus King, but neither of them have made their bones or in a position to, at this point, capture momentum and say, by the way, on that $1.5 trillion that Joe has, within it we've got to have $50 billion for Columbia-class missiles. So tell me the impact of all this on Terry McAuliffe. It appears to me, and I am thinking of the Kentucky governor's race 5 years ago when the polling was off 13, maybe 12 points. They thought that Matt was going to lose by 6. He won by 5. I think that's what it was in Kentucky. I think we're in the same situation in Virginia, though not that of a swing that people are not anticipated, though perhaps not that large. What do you think, Jake?
I don't know the answer to that. We wrote about this a couple days ago. I had a conversation with a senior Democrat the other day who made the point that they believe that Virginia has had a permanent realignment, meaning permanently a Democratic state. It's gone for the last 2 Democratic presidents. They've swept House races and they've just been really strong in Virginia over the last couple of years. And Democrats think that people are overthinking this and that Republicans don't actually have a chance. And the polls, which have McAuliffe, as you note, up 4 or 5 points, something like that, 3 points in some places, is just right. And McAuliffe is acting like he's going to lose for his own political purposes. Now, I don't know the answer to that. I have no idea who's going to win. I do accept the argument that there has been somewhat of a permanent realignment in many parts of Virginia, including Northern Virginia. I just think if Northern Virginia will...
Oops, we lost Jake. Oh. See, in the Trafalgar Group poll, which is the most recent, it shows it tied, just absolutely tied. And in my view, Massachusetts, which is a permanently blue presidential vote, might be like Virginia, because in Massachusetts, the locals vote in Republican governors of a certain sort, whether it's Charlie Baker or Mitt Romney, and Glenn Youngkin is of that sort. Serious, educated, purposeful, and driven by education and at-home issues. So Massachusetts is never going to vote for the Republican for president, but it often votes for the Republican for governor.
Yeah,
that's consistent with a blue realignment in the suburbs, because you're never going to get the Northern Virginia suburbs to vote for a Republican from any sort of conservative point of view. But I think parents are different, Jake. I really do think the school issue has been underestimated by Democrats. Last word to you, Jake.
Yeah, and I think, listen, and to bolster your point, we've seen closer races at the senatorial level over the last couple of years than we have at the governor's level. So, yeah, you could be right.
Jake Sherman from punchbowlnews.com. Thank you. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to this Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Now, this is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families. through an unlikely alliance between the Chinese government and a British footballer. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. With unprecedented access across the country, this is a unique insight into the lives of the 90s orphans now driving the 21st century's fastest growing economy.
This story needs to be told across the world. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as is any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Did you ever think that Terry McAuliffe would actually publicly state that the Democrat president is the reason that he might lose Virginia?
Of course, I never expected it, never thought it would happen before this president. Listen, here's the deal. We all knew, as you and I stood there on January 20th and we saw President Trump fly to Florida. Their usual racial politics is, okay, when you Kamala Harris. And that what they have now is a president who doesn't know forget what year it is, probably still thinks it's like 1976, okay? And they've got a vice president who's universally despised and doesn't have any adult skill.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now.
Welcome back, America, especially my new affiliate, WLNL, The Bell, 1000 AM in Horsehead, New York. I always love having more New Yorkers. There's hope for your state yet. There's hope for your state yet. I think maybe in this next governor's race, you're going to wake up to the fact that the whole Cuomo thing was a charade, a facade, a joke on you, and you paid for it. But I'm great to have WLNL with me. Hit the bell. All I know of New York is New York City and Peak. I'm from Eastern Ohio, my new listeners, in Northeastern Ohio. So I could ski as a kid up in upstate New York and loved upstate New York. And, of course, the Buffalo Bills are near and dear to any Browns fan's heart. We never have to play them in any sort of championship situation, so I have no evil feelings towards the Bills. I hope that our Baker Mayfield stays better than your Josh, but we will find out if Josh Allen would have been a better choice for the Browns eventually. I like the fact that Baker's a gamer. Let me remind all of you that Alliance Defending Freedom is sponsoring their annual fundraising drive, and they sponsor this show, and I sponsor them. I contribute as best I can. I go to their events. I teach their students at Blackstone. I moderate their media seminars because I think it's important to have a good grasp on constitutional law, And that requires you to be a part of the ADF. I met a young lawyer on at the awards ceremony of the Architect of Peace Award last, Thursday night in Yorba Linda, California at the Nixon Library. Herschel Walker is coming up next hour. I went down on Wednesday to do an event with Herschel Walker and AM 920 in Atlanta, Brian Westbury and Alfredo Ortiz from Job Creators Network. And after that, I flew out to California so I could be on hand to salute former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien in the receipt of the Nixon Foundation Architect of Peace Award, which has been given to people like Henry Kissinger and George Shultz, only to people who make significant advancements in world peace. And I was very happy to be there. And there are groups that advance America's national security abroad, but there are groups like Alliance Defending Freedom, which protect your liberty at home. Why fight abroad unless it's for liberty at home? Why make all these massive efforts abroad? Why build an answer to the Chinese hypersonic unless it is to protect the freedom of Americans to grow and prosper and to learn and to thrive? That's what Alliance Defending Freedom does every single day in classrooms across the country. And I want to ask you to please be as generous as possible. You can also call 866-359-9644. At that dinner, by the way, Mike Pompeo gave a talk, as did Robert O'Brien. I'll play you a clip from both of them. At one point, Mike Pompeo talked about how to send a message to the evildoers in Iran, cut number 18.
We came to a point with Iran where I think they viewed their capacity to move about the cabin as too significant. And then we learned that there was an effort to kill Americans being led by a general named Qasem Soleimani. I had been the director of the CIA. I knew this file incredibly well. And we had an opportunity where he was traveling from Beirut to Damascus to Baghdad. And we had talked to the president about this a number of times. I flew with the then Secretary of Defense, my West Point classmate, in fact, Mark Esper. We flew to Mar-a-Lago. Ambassador Bryan was part of the conversation, so was General Millen. We briefed the president about the opportunity, not the opportunity to strike Qasem Soleimani, but the opportunity to demonstrate American resolve and further our efforts to build out what could ultimately become increased peace in the Middle East. We briefed the president on the operation and what it would look like. The president knew the risks. The risks, of course, from the professionals were this will create World War III. The Iranians will counterattack. There'll be attacks all throughout America. But we made the case to the president that we knew how to address those and that it was worthy and that we could, in fact, save American lives. The president authorized the mission to move forward. I'll never forget, I was turned around and headed out. As often the case, the president had one more thought. And I remembered, too, that I'd forgotten. He said, Mike, you're confident. I said, yes, sir. One more thing I'd like to mention to you. I said, what's that? And I said, this is the first time that we have fired a Hellfire missile at an international commercial airport. And he gave me that look like, it's on you, my man.
Mike Pompeo gave an incredibly inspiring speech about being a warrior for peace. It's over at the Nixon Foundation. You ought to go watch it. So did Ambassador O'Brien. Maybe I'll play a couple of cuts of his when we get back. Don't go anywhere, America. You're listening to the West Coast edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Sanjay Gupta is used to the CNN way of doing things, which is, kind of kid gloves. And Joe Rogan said, no. You're in the lion's den now. You see, this is a place where people have testosterone, wisdom, and patriotism. You work for CNN where none of those things exist.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
No. We're not.
The rest of them are all lying about me taking horse medication. And we should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you, too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs for veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing... That's a lie that they're conscious of. It's not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
I love it. Rarely do you see justice happen in real time. Rarely. I'm a big fan of the book of Job. And one of the things I like about the book of Job is that it's real. It's authentic. It's kind of why do bad things happen to good people? That's what the book of Job is about. In the second book of Plato's Republic, it talks about justice, and actually the narrative frames that good things happen to people that do good and bad things happen to things that do bad, and rarely do you actually ever get to see justice play out in real time. That's justice. Sanjay Gupta having to sit down for 2 hours of Joe Rogan being like, it should bother you. It's a conscious lie where you're saying that I should take a horse dewormer. And Sanjay Gupta said, man, that really bothered you. Yeah, it was the #1 news story on the planet that Joe Rogan is going around to Preakness or the Kentucky Derby with his hands open asking for medication.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened.
It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I grew up poor, which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the California studio today, on the West Coast today and tomorrow. I'm looking at the New York Times summary of yesterday's NFL action, and it says, what we learned from the weekend 6 in the NFL, and it says wrongly that Lamar Jackson can win any kind of game. He can't beat the Browns, and we will prove that to you. J-O-K is now there. Lamar, you try and run on J-O-K. One-dimensional team like the Ravens going to run into the Browns when they're healthy. Well, we got to get 2 tackles back, Jed and Jack. Both of our starting tackles are gone. Chris Hubbard is out for the year. And we had 2 rookies playing, Blake Hansen and Hudson. And Mr. Hudson III did not do great against the Cardinals yesterday, but we are undeterred. We will be fine. Let me tell you what makes me mad about the CDC. Okay, my daughter and 2 of my grandchildren have COVID. My daughter has a breakout case, and my children, my grandkids, are under the age where you would even get a vaccine. And we are blessed that the breakout case is a pain in the neck. It's a bad cold, but the kids are mild cases. And I assume my 3rd grandchild, they're all under the double-digit number, so none of them are vaccinated, they're just assuming that one's positive too. And so we would like to know, can we go to help? Can one or both of us go to help? Fetching Mrs. Hewitt or I. So we spend Saturday and Sunday looking around. Now, we're both double vaccinated, and we've had boosters more than 3 weeks ago. I got a booster as soon as I could. So did the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt, because I like to think we're smart people, and I've read all the science, and I've got a toxicologist in the family, and we are a family of, if I'm not a scientist, I listen to scientists, and yes, get vaccinated, get your booster. But you can't find the answer to whether grandma and grandpa can go help the COVID-impacted family, even if they've been double vaccinated with a booster. You can't find it. They won't. It's just not there. So how many people do you think in America run into this? I don't think I'm alone. I don't think it's Fetching Mrs. Hewitt alone. So we're going to figure it out. But I went to the Mayo Clinic, went to the CDC, went all the way around. Didn't go to any of the whack jobs. Just stick with the FDA, the CDC, and the Mayo Clinic and other reputable healthcare institutions, and you won't find anything. In clear cut, very quickly, here's what you do. Vaccinated grandparents who've had a booster. Here's what you do, vaccinated grandparents. Here's what you do, unvaccinated grandparents. In the latter category, you stay away because you're old and you're vulnerable. In the middle category, I don't know. I think we can go. My view is the plane might crash, but we won't be in any trouble going because my son-in-law is away on military duty. And so it's up to us. That's what grandparents of military families do, is they pitch in, as does the community. It's a good community, but you don't know what to... I can't believe we are a year and a half into this, and you can't find one page with clear guidance. Not one page. Really. Dr. Collins, Dr. Fauci, what do you do all day other than hits on media? Can you not provide... Oh, don't get me going. Let me check the markets. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. And by the way, I saw over the weekend that a lot of refinancings have ended and home purchases have begun at places like AndrewandTodd.com, a great sponsor of this show. AndrewandTodd.com with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, they lend people money to do one of 2 things. Buy a house or refinance a house. Now, if you're refinancing, you still want to start with AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. And if you're buying, you want to definitely start with Andrew and Todd, 888-888-1172, or just go to their website, andrewandtodd.com. Why? Because it's increasingly difficult to get a loan. And this is not the 2007 situation was, are you breathing? We'll give you a loan. Subprime is gone. It's dead. This is not an inflationary, this is not a speculative bubble in the United States. It's people realizing that inflation is here to stay, and one place to put money is real estate. So they're buying houses, buying second homes, buying rental properties, buying into people like KeyCityCapital.com, another one of my sponsors, which can invest you in limited funds that invest in rental properties in second-tier markets like Nashville and Austin and places like that. Smart, good investment. But if you can buy your own apartment, great. If you can buy your own second house, great. Where do you do that? AndrewandTodd.com. The Journal said the refi boom is going to be over pretty soon. Now, not if you've been Rip Van Winkling it through these low interest rates. And we still have ridiculously low interest rates. You'll still get a 30-year fixed, maybe under 3, probably above 3. Now, it's ticked up. I've been warning you. You could have gotten it 2.5, 3 months ago. Now it'll be at 3, which is still a lot lower than it's going to be in a year. A lot lower than it's going to be in a year. So please don't wait. Become a non-occupying co-borrower with your kid or your grandchild if they need to get into a house. Put your credit on the line to get them into the housing ladder, get them on the first rung or the second rung of the housing ladder. Let me check the market over the weekend because, Friday was a great day on the market. In fact, everything was green on Friday. Everything was green on Friday, and not by small amounts. And it's not loading for me. All I can tell you is that everything was up, and all the markets earlier this morning were up and overseas. I do not know what the market will do today. I never make a prediction. I don't give you where are they right now? Oh, guess what? It turned a little bit red overseas in that. I should have been more careful. Yep, the English are down 1/4 point, Germany down 1/2 point, and France down 3/4 point. The 10-year Treasury at 1.576, which is good. Gold at 1763. But the big deal is oil. Oil is at crude, $83 a barrel, and Brent crude, $85.66. I've never understood the difference between those, and I doubt you understand either. All I know is they're going up, which means the price of everything goes up, including the airline ticket I will need to fly anywhere. Inflation is back. We spent all Wednesday night in Atlanta at AM 920 talking about it, and I want to tell you, get refinanced now. Go to andrewandtodd.com. I also encourage you to go to the Center for Christian Virtue in Ohio. On Sunday night, this coming Sunday, I will be moderating a debate between the 6 candidates in the Republican primary who wish to replace Rob Portman. All 6 of them are coming together under the auspices of 98.9. That is our Salem affiliate, The Answer in Columbus. Also a Browns affiliate, so we're all very sad down there. Ohio State did not play this weekend, but they went up in the ratings anyway because Iowa got beaten by Purdue, if you can believe it. Purdue beat Iowa. Iowa's ranked number 2 in the United States, and Purdue beat it. That's when the slide rules come out, and you wonder how in the world they even field a football team. They got a big drum, we understand that, but I don't mean to disparage Purdue. I really don't. I've never been to Purdue. I don't even know what city Purdue is in. Is Purdue a city? I heard Doug LeMaurice talk about this once. I'm not sure what the answer was. But Purdue beat Iowa. And so Ohio State will now be ranked 5 in the country. I think the AP came out and they're 5. Cincinnati is going into Annapolis this weekend. And were I not traveling, I would be at Memorial Stadium up in Annapolis to root for the Mids to take out the Bearcats so they stop clogging up the top of the ranking. The Final Four, it's pretty easy. It's going to be Alabama, Georgia, Cincinnati, and Ohio State. Why? Because I watched some of the Oregon game against Berkeley Bears, and Cal Bears almost beat them. The Ducks are a broken wing. UCLA will probably take them out this week. I hope so. So it's going to be 2 Ohio teams and 2 SEC teams, and that's actually the way football is in America. If you actually know anything about football, you know it's Ohio against the world. And that includes Texas, even though Texas no longer plays football, to my knowledge, given the fact that Texas can't win anything. I know Oklahoma's undefeated, but they're not going to stay undefeated. They're not any good either. Right now, people say, oh, no, it's going to be Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, and Cincinnati. No. Ohio State's the best team in the country right now, and they're showing it. Ohio State at least has the best offense in the country, and Georgia has the best defense in the country. That's all you need to know about college football. Here's what you need to know about Robert O'Brien, who also, with Mike Pompeo, received the Architect of Peace Award last week. Here is Ambassador O'Brien talking about the keystone achievement of the Trump years, the Abraham Accords. One aspect of it, cut number 14.
Now you saw the photos of the flight of the first commercial flight. It was an El Al flight that we took from Ben Gurion Airport to Abu Dhabi International Airport. And I was flying, Jared was on the flight, I was on the flight, and Meir Ben Shabbat, the Israeli National Security Advisor, was on the flight. And we were flying to Abu Dhabi to have the first trilateral meeting after the Abraham Accords between the U.S., the UAE, and the Israeli National Security Advisors, and see how we could confront the terrorism, not just of ISIS and the jihadis, but the terrorism of Iran. And as we flew into Saudi airspace, the captain came on and in heavily accented Hebrew accent in English said, "We've just entered Saudi airspace." And I looked over and our colleagues, and these are pretty tough guys. I mean, these are Israeli security officials. They were getting teary-eyed, and they were getting very emotional. And my wife will tell you, I've got kind of a bad sense of humor. And I looked at him, I said, hey guys, let's face it, this isn't the first time an Israeli jet has flown over Saudi airspace. And Meir Ben Shabbat looked at me and Meir said, yes, but it's the first time we've been invited. And it was a very special moment.
That was a very special moment. Ambassador O'Brien gave a great set of remarks. Secretary Pompeo gave a great set of remarks. Both of them received the statue of Nixon with his hand extended, the Zhou Enlai pose, we call it, famous in photos around the world. Both men, great recipients of this. Now, Greg Abbott was on with Maria Bartiromo yesterday and made the case for a constitutional argument against a national vaccine mandate, cut number 13.
Well, you make a good point about all the people resigning, because that's one of the problems with regard to the supply chain, because so many people who are being forced to get a vaccine do not want to do that, and hence they're leaving their jobs. However, to answer your question, clearly what President Biden is doing is unconstitutional. There is zero authority in the Constitution that gives the president or his administration the authority to mandate anybody taking a vaccine, and that's why we feel very confident that the state executive order will supersede the federal executive order, because the federal executive order is completely unconstitutional. We want to make sure that our fellow Texans who have been forced into this impossible situation about
I believe Governor Abbott
providing
is correct on the law. It is very much within the president's authority as commander-in-chief to order federal troops to be vaccinated. It is very much within the president's authority as head of the unitary executive to command anyone employed by the federal government to get a vaccine. There is no legislation on the books that would allow him to compel a vaccine, because he does not have a general police power. He would have to make an argument, and Congress would have to pass a statute that, pursuant to the Interstate Commerce Clause, the effect of being unvaccinated is so significant that it will support an expression of federal power. Remember, the Constitution grants limited powers to the federal government. One of them is not vaccination power. That's the police power that belongs to the states. It's not even a close call, in my view. But they don't care about the Constitution of the Democratic Party. They really do not care about it. I believe Governor Abbott will win. Now, I believe that governors would be well advised to require their state employees and cities, their state employees, to get vaccinated, because it's simply going to be necessary. But there is no way that the federal government can, for example, say all children in the United States must be vaccinated. Those are state and local decisions that must be made in state and local authorities at the right time. Let me remind you, a decision you can make every day is to use this product right here, ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. I took it in the first hour. I remind you about hours 2 and 3. Now, I have a long day. I'm talking with the Salem sales staff later today, and we sell everything on this show that I believe in. And we have the greatest Salem sales staff ever, and I want to talk to them about how to let people know we have the greatest audience in the world. Across 400 affiliates, the people that listen to this show, I meet them in Atlanta on Wednesday night. I met them in Yorba Linda, California on Thursday night. And I know how much they listen to and love this show because of our guests, because of our content, because of ReliefFactor.com. And ReliefFactor.com will get me through the sales call, through the show, through dermatology. Today I'll look like Popeye or Long John Silver at the end of that. If you watch the Nixon Foundation night, the feed with Bret Baier, I don't know if I have an eye patch on or if it'll just be swollen up like a Rocky ending of the Rocky. Herschel was talking about Rocky. I'm going to talk to Herschel Walker at the start. But I recommend to you ReliefFactor.com. John Bursch, Senior Counsel from Alliance Defending Freedom, is coming up next. Head over to HughHewitt.com and go to the top to support Alliance Defending Freedom.
Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Y lo siento mucho.
That's the only time you can come to Christ. When the Spirit of God calls you to the cross, don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, Padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
CNN is going crazy. Joe Rogan called them out the other day. Now they're sitting there trying to lie and say, no, we never called ivermectin a horse dewormer. So we'll play a couple audio clips for you because they sure as heck did. And quite frankly, in my opinion, they're complicit in the deaths. And I don't say this lightly. I don't say it just because I want to say something that's shocking on air. I sincerely believe it. I believe Facebook. I believe a lot of these big tech companies. I believe CNN, MSNBC. A lot of these people are complicit in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. I really do. For not getting the word out on therapeutics.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us. So please do the right thing.
Now you're being patient again. We shouldn't be divided on the vaccine mandate. Now you're back to that because guess what? Your obstinance isn't working. Your mandates aren't working. Are there going to be booster mandates? Have you noticed nobody's talked about a booster mandate? Does a mandate only apply to round one? What about round 2 or 3? It is the left who has politicized COVID. Not us.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by John Burch, Senior Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. We are in the middle of our sponsor, Alliance Defending Freedom's fundraising campaign. They do this once a year. Over at HughHewitt.com, you'll find the banner, which you just have to click on to make a contribution to ADF so that they can fight the fight for freedom, for religious liberty, and for individual conscience protection across the United States. John, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm terrific.
I want to play for you a clip of Greg Abbott on Fox Sunday with Maria Bartiromo yesterday, and then get your reaction to it. Here is Governor Abbott of Texas.
Well, you make a good point about all the people resigning, because that's one of the problems with regard to the supply chain, because so many people who are being forced to get a vaccine do not want to do that, and hence they're leaving their jobs. However, to answer your question, clearly, what President Biden is doing is unconstitutional. There is zero authority in the Constitution that gives the president or his administration the authority to mandate anybody taking a vaccine, and that's why we feel very confident.
So stop right there. John Bursch, I agree with this so far as it goes to people not employed by the federal government. Do you agree with this? Is Alliance Defending involved in any of the vaccination litigation?
Absolutely, we're involved in litigation, and when this executive order comes out, we would very much like to file a couple lawsuits to challenge it. The federal government is supposed to be one of limited powers, and the states and the local governments are where general police and health and safety regulations should be taking place. And we feel very confident about bringing those arguments to the federal court system.
Great. I'm just glad to know that I agree with ADF. I just took that position in the segment prior, John, that this is a government, until and unless Congress says that the Commerce Clause is somehow implicated in the distribution of vaccines and thereby installs the president with the authority to order them. This isn't happening. Even then, it might not happen. Second big question, the ACLU fired a lawsuit on Friday against Loudoun County teachers who have said they will not abide by the Loudoun County policy that they must use the pronouns selected by their students, and they must use them in every class no matter what they're picking that day. You know, that's actually an invitation to chaos. You know what high school students are like. I would change my pronoun every day just to screw with Fred Hoover, who's a good friend of mine now. But I mean, are you guys going to get involved and stop the ACLU on this?
Well, what's crazy about that is we already have a lawsuit. We represent 3 of the teachers in Loudoun County, and we're suing the school district over that policy, that very policy that the ACLU is talking about. So they're piling on, and what's ridiculous is that this organization, which once stood for Americans' religious liberties, including the right to free speech, the ACLU, has now gone 180 degrees in the other direction, and they're trying to compel speech against people's personal and religious consciences. It's outrageous that they would jump into this to try to persecute people and compel them to speak. And what's so sad about the whole thing, as you know, Hugh, is that when you call someone by a pronoun or a title or a name that isn't consistent with who they are, isn't consistent with reality, it's a lie. And when we tell lies, it can do great damage and harm. And there are a few things that are more harmful than affirming a dysphoria in someone who has it. And yet that's the agenda the ACLU is pushing. It hurts kids, and it violates constitutional rights. We are in the middle of that, and we're going to win.
So if you want to support Alliance Defending Freedom in the pronouns lawsuit, go over to HughHewitt.com and hit that banner at the top. Takes 5 seconds to load, and be as generous as you can. John, would you explain this policy from Loudoun County? Honestly, does it mean that Mr. Hoover has to sit there with Greg Reynolds and Mark Peterson on either side of me, the Meanie Miny Mo, the 3 blind mice, the 3 monkeys? All we did was screw with Fred. And if we just changed our pronouns every day, he had to, and he has to use them. Is that what it means in Loudoun County?
The policy says if the kid formally changes their name or their pronouns or their titles, then teachers are compelled to use them. The University of Michigan tried this a few years ago, and there was a student who did say that he demanded he wanted to be called Your Highness. And I don't know whatever became of that at the University of Michigan. But, it's not simply the kids who are messing around. It's the ones who are seriously having problems with their own identities. And the best research that we have shows that 80 to 95% of kids who are experiencing some kind of gender dysphoria, if left on their own, will eventually resolve all those things and align their mind with their body. But if you go in and you start affirming someone's dysphoria, the boy who thinks he's a girl or vice versa, or the non-binary or something else altogether, 100% of those kids will end up having dysphoria and all the problems that go with that for their entire life.
But John, if I were making this argument, just tell me how you're arguing. I would not argue that, because that gets into science, and we know what happens when courts
right.
We
don't need to go there to win the case.
No, to win the case, you simply have to point out this is chaos, right? This is just absolutely asking for chaos.
Well, even more fundamental than that, the First Amendment guarantees every person the right to be able to speak their own mind and not be compelled to speak the government's message. And we already won this case once in a case that I argued in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the federal appeals court for Michigan, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio. And they held that a college professor had the First Amendment right to not call students by their preferred titles and pronouns because that violates the First Amendment.
No, I'm not as sure about the Fourth Circuit as I am the Sixth. They might actually create a split in the circuits that you could take to the Supreme Court. But I don't even believe the Fourth Circuit is nutty enough to say, yeah, kids get to decide their pronouns for the day. John Bursch from Alliance Defending Freedom. Thank you, John. Alliance Defends on Twitter at the top of HughHewitt.com. You can go there and be as generous as possible, or you can call 866 359-9644, 866-359-9644, and make a contribution today. I'll be back, Bret, Baier, next hour on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
This White House has absolutely no idea what is happening in America. It is completely divorced from reality, devoid of any understanding. And you know, they always say that the organization reflects the leader. Well, they've got a feckless, pathetic, completely out-to-lunch leader, and that has completely permeated this White House, if you can call it that.
So at this point, it's hard to imagine how much worse the situation could get. In that case, the question I always return to, and you are a guy who's worked on so many campaigns, not just in the White House, your political sense is fine-tuned. Is there not a point, if you look at the cargo ships off LA, you look at the 2 million illegal aliens, you look at the 4 million people who resigned from their jobs last year, you look at the inflation, you look at everything to do with national security, with Afghanistan. Is there no point at which Biden becomes an albatross around the neck of the Democrats, or are they just too afraid to have the cackler in the Oval?
It's happened already. Look at Virginia.
Yeah.
Terry McAuliffe is losing to Youngkin in a race where Biden won by 10 points.
But hang on, Boris.
Okay?
Boris, it's not just that, you know, Youngkin has a shot. Did you ever think that Terry McAuliffe would actually publicly state that the Democrat president is the reason that he might lose Virginia?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at Rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
But yet our country is controlled by Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and BioNTech. And therefore, we're not even allowed to have a conversation about ivermectin. But the few people that are free speech warriors like Joe Rogan, he does not let up. Cut 55, and then we'll go through all three cuts here. And this is, by the way, if you have not listened to this podcast discussion with Sanjay Gupta, it's incredible. Because maybe Sanjay Gupta thought that they were going to have a nice little conversation about why people need to wear masks. I don't know what he was thinking going on Joe Rogan's show. But Joe is mad, and good for Joe. Joe Rogan asked Sanjay Gupta, does it bother you that CNN lied about me? Cut 55.
Does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before coming on your podcast.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
They did. I watched.
Gorgeous. I want to frame that. Because because we see this little shriveling of a weak human, Sanjay Gupta. I should have asked. I didn't know. You understand that these media reporters have never been called out before? I think Sanjay Gupta was there to promote a book. I don't think it's doing very well after that. I think he has a new book, like COVID War Zero or something. I really think it's called World War COVID. I think that's the name of the book. And so CNN, he's the medical guy there. And so Joe says, you're the medical guy there. What do you mean? And Joe Rogan doesn't give up. He's a dog with a bone, everybody. He says, wait a second. It should bother you. It's a lie on your network, and it's your conscience of it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
It's not just about saying I have a right in this country to not have the government not allow me to go to church, but also that the government cannot compel me to participate in any sort of event, including a vaccine, by the way, that goes against my sincerely held religious beliefs. And so it should just be a matter of course that if you have a conscious objection, then you can say, I, as a Christian, as a Muslim, as a Jew, as any sort of religion, I mean, this covers all religions, by the way, all faiths, all sincerely held beliefs, you should be able to say, I decline to be coerced into participation. But what we're seeing is that a lot of employers are not only requiring a lot of information for people to say, you know, well, you have to justify your religious exemption. We're also seeing that they want this so-called, what they're calling an interactive process. That's basically an interrogation. I have clients right now that they have filed for a religious exemption on the basis of we're pro-life, that's what the Bible teaches, and I cannot take this vaccine. And the Human Resources Department, from the legal counsel of these employers, want to sit down and basically interrogate them and say, is this really a sincerely held religious belief? And they're using this as a pretext to try to deny religious exemptions. It's absurd, and I hope that when there are more lawsuits filed, like just today, in Texas, United Airlines was forbidden from enforcing their vaccine mandate against employees who are claiming a religious exemption. So we're already seeing that the courts are protecting this, but hopefully it'll be more than just Texas.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
They lied
What did
and
they
said
say?
I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
They
with
shouldn't have said a it was bunch
of other medications.
If you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking it, the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication.
Did you see how uncomfortable he was? See, leftists aren't used to pushback, and that's exactly what Joe Rogan gave them, pushback. They're used to existing in these bubbles. They all think alike. They all talk alike. I'm not even sure that they all believe the same thing, but they're so cowardly that they just live to him a couple of times on CNN. I've watched some I don't have a lot of respect for Sanjay Gupta because I believe that he deceives a lot of people as well. I believe CNN does that. And first off, the drug ivermectin, we know that it's a human drug. He knows that it's a human drug.
Dude.
And Joe Rogan, my goodness, called him out on it.
Dude.
And it's a good thing. And by the way, let me correct the record. The medicine for animals is called neuromectin, not ivermectin. So not only is CNN lying about it, they don't even have the decency to look up the correct drug for you. This is why we cannot trust the mainstream media. They just lie.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt across 400 affiliates, including our new affiliate in Horseheads, New York, AM 1000. Good to have you along, Horsehead. I learned a few things on Wednesday night in Georgia. when I appeared with Brian Westbury, Alfredo Ortiz, and my guest, Herschel Walker. First, I learned don't get between a Georgia fan and Herschel Walker. You get run over. 2, don't ask Herschel Walker why he didn't go to Ohio State University. And 3, don't play Rocky Trivia with Herschel. Finally, I learned his nickname is Bo, which I never knew before. Good morning, Herschel Walker. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hello there. Hey, thank you for having me on.
It was great working with you on Wednesday night, and I especially appreciated a couple of things you said, and I want to go over that. Would you explain to people that because of your own mental health background, you work a lot with our troops to make sure that they don't let mental health issues get in the way of their coming home?
Well, about 15 years ago, I started a program called Patriot Support because, we have our young men and women that go over to these countries and they fight for this country here, the greatest country in the world, and some of them can adapt and some of them cannot, and they have problems, and we call them crazy because they may have a mental illness. Well, I went through a mental thing in my life after football, and I overcame it. And my thing is I want to get it and help the military by having this program called Patriot Support, where I go to a base and I tell them there's no shame to ask for help. I try to talk them through it and then help them to understand what's going on. And since then, I've been to over 400 bases all over the world.
You see, I think that's amazing, and I thank you for that. And people who want to get behind Herschel, head to teamherschel.com, teamherschel.com. I saw your fundraising numbers for the first quarter that you've been campaigning, Herschel. They were pretty hefty. They look like your stat sheet.
Well, they were pretty good, and I got to thank the people of Georgia and thank the United States, all the people that contributed, and I want them to know we got to continue this fight, because right now you see the left, they're raising a lot of money. They want to try to keep this seat, and we got to take this seat from them. I think the people can see what's going on, and I've told them this is not something I thought I'd be doing, but it's something that I have to do. We can't just sit on the sideline, people. We got to get out there and let people know that America is a great place. Let people know the state of Georgia is a wonderful place, and the way we're going to have to do it, we've got to contribute to my campaign, and I'm going to fight for you. I'm not going to Washington just to put another feather in my cap. I don't need that. I'm going to Washington to fight for the people and let them know that they can put some integrity back into this into our elected officials when I get there.
Now, Pastor Warnock, now Senator Warnock, had a very good quarter himself, so there's going to be a lot of negative stuff thrown at you, Herschel Walker. Are you anticipating that?
I am. I'm anticipating a lot of things. I think people see it right now. That's what's been thrown at me, and it's not about Herschel Walker. I think that's what people got to realize. Running for this office here and running for this seat is not about me. It's about the people. And whatever they throw at me, I'm going to be ready for it. Right now, when I decided to do it, I went through a lot of prayer. I prayed, and I'm ready. I'm fighting for something that's much, much bigger than Herschel Walker.
Now, I met your wonderful wife on Wednesday night, and she's a fighter too. But is your whole family ready for this? Because I know your son's kind of a YouTube star. It's going to be a grind.
It is. It's going to be a big grind, but and I think that's what people don't realize is my whole family. We went through a lot of prayer. This was never something I thought I'd ever be doing. But it's not about us. We're Christian people. We love the Lord Jesus, and right now what's going on in this country is a shame. And if I don't do it, who will? If I don't step out there to fight for this, what is going to happen? I think then I become a hypocrite because, I tell kids every day, you got to sacrifice to make good grades. You got to sacrifice to be an athlete. If you want anything, you got to sacrifice to get it. Right now, what's going on in this country, I got to sacrifice something. My family got to sacrifice something because we don't like what's going on. My family, we're not going to sit on the sideline. We're great Georgia people. We love the state of Georgia. We love this country, and we're just not going to sit on the sideline anymore.
The number one attack on you, Herschel Walker, and we talked about it on Wednesday night, even it's not a political event at the Atlanta History Center. I was just getting your bio out for people, is you're going to be called a carpetbagger. You're going to be, he's lived in Texas. After Georgia and after professional football, he went and lived in Texas. He's just coming back to win. How do you respond to that?
Well, the way I respond to that is why don't they ask the people of Georgia? Why don't they ask people in Wrightsville? Why don't they ask people there in Atlanta where I go to the country store? Have they seen me there? They've seen me there over and over and over. And I don't care what they call me because it doesn't matter what they call me. It matters what Herschel Walker does for the state of Georgia. and they got to call me names to try to get me. They think they're going to get me to shut up, to get me to go away. But it's sad that calling me names doesn't bother me. I was called that when I was a little kid growing up. Right now, this is about running for a very, very important seat. This is about running for something much bigger than one person. So they're going to have to do something better than that than to just call me names.
Now, you clearly have President Trump behind you. You clearly have the former president's backing. What about the Republican Party in Georgia? Are they either going to be neutral or behind you?
Well, I think some may be behind me. No, I know some are going to be behind me because they've already gotten behind me, and President Trump is behind me. But everyone that get behind me know that Herschel Walker is going to have to do this himself. I'm going to get out there and have to show the people that I can get this done. I'm going to have to bring people together. That's one of the things I think this Republican Party got to do right now is let's try to come together to win this seat. And then one of the things I told the people, I said, guys, I'm not going to sit here and try to promise you the world. What I want to do, promise you, is I want to bring people together, both across the aisle as well. The way we get things done, we got to bring people together, start fighting for this country, start fighting for the state of Georgia, and that's how you get things done. Right now, this is not a big Democrat or big Republican thing. This is a United States. This is a Georgia thing.
So, Herschel, I want to close. Thank you for coming back. I got to ask you a football question, though. The Cleveland Browns depends upon Nick Chubb getting back in the game. Do you know Nick Chubb?
I do know Nick Chubb, an incredible Georgia guy that has done a lot for the University of Georgia, has done a lot for his hometown. And right now he's doing a lot for Cleveland. He got injured a little bit, but I tell you what, he's a tough guy.
We really need him because I think Kareem Hunt last night took it in the Achilles. Were you watching that game by chance?
No, I wasn't watching the Cleveland game. I don't watch a lot of football, and I was keeping up with the Braves game a little bit, and I ended up watching some other show on TV, but I was trying to keep up with a couple of things going on.
Well, Achilles, it looked like maybe a partial tear of the Achilles. Did you ever have any kind of injury like that, Herschel? Because I don't know how hard it is to come back from Achilles injury if you're a running back.
It remind me of what's happening right now is I dislocated my shoulder in the Notre Dame game, and I dislocated my shoulder, and they told me I couldn't play anymore, and I'm like, why? They said, because your shoulder's out of place. And I said, you can put it back, and they told me you're going to take surgery. Well, I had them to pop my shoulder back in place against Notre Dame, and that was the second play of the game. I went in there and played, and we ended up winning the national championship. And I said, that's what is going on in this country right now. It seems like something is dislocated. We're not getting along. Something is happening. So I'm going to help them to get it back right by saying I'm not giving up. I'm going to let them pop this back in place, and we're going to go out there and get things done.
That's what Baker Mayfield did. He had his second dislocation of the season last night, went in the blue tent, popped it back in. We didn't win, but the Browns got back out there and played. That takes some strength. I sure hope.
It does. Let me tell you what, that is for a quarterback, even though it was his left shoulder, but that is a very, very tough injury for a quarterback, for anyone, because, you're going to take a lot of pounding on your shoulder, but he has been one heck of a quarterback there in Cleveland for a while, and I think he's going to continue to do some great things. Been a great leader. He's been an incredible leader, and tell you what, a great quarterback.
So he's going to be our guy in Cleveland. Let me close by asking you, you'll get ambushed a lot of gotcha questions, Herschel. What are you going to do when they come up and ask you, I don't expect you to know about hypersonic missiles in China circulating one today. I do by the time the race comes down. What are you going to do when you get ambushed?
I'm probably going to laugh and say, I think you're trying to make fun of me. Because right now you're trying to get me with one of these gotcha questions, and that is not what the people are really worried about. And they're probably from the University of Alabama, since I went to Georgia. So that's probably what they're trying to do.
Herschel Walker, good to talk to you. TeamHerschel.com if you want to help out Herschel Walker. Herschel, great to meet you on Wednesday night. I look forward to having you back early and often on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hey, thank you, and I tell you what, I had a great time on Wednesday night, and thank all you guys for small businesses. Right now they're hurting real bad, and thank you for what you guys are doing.
We are happy to be there. The Job Creators Network was happy to be there, and Brian Westbury was terrific. Herschel Walker, thank you, friend. Do not get between Herschel Walker and people of Georgia. I've been run over a few times in my life, like when I got between people and Brian Sipe at lunch, or when I got between people and Bernie Kosar in Ohio. You just don't get between if I got between Baker and anyone in Cleveland right now, I'd be lying flat on my ground. But I learned that with Herschel in Georgia. And I know that Senator Warnock is looking every day at his numbers and saying, this is not good. Herschel's going to run me over like he ran over the USFL. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Now.
We'll see one young lady identify as transgender, and the next thing you know, 6 or 7 young ladies in that same school are now identifying as transgender.
Children taught at age 5 they can create their gender identity, and it's being celebrated.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Every cell of their body that has a nucleus is male or female.
We've now seen parents losing custody of their children if they don't go along with this.
We've all been created XY or XX, so that means there's only 2 genders. And so really the battle is against the creator.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
But can you share with us an overview of how Mark Zuckerberg and his wife directed literally hundreds of millions, I think $419 million into communities, into areas that Biden really needed, and how that plays out?
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, donated out of their own personal resources, not through they have a private foundation that they normally would do something like this through, but they went through they use their own private resources, and they funneled those resources into a little sleepy Chicago-based nonprofit called Center for Technology and Civic Life. This had nothing to do with conventional campaign finance, like a donation to the DNC to blanket the airwaves with a pro-Democrat Party message. This was money that was funneled through this little 501c3, which is supposed to be nonpartisan organization, directly into the election process. It's as if the DNC was somehow able to insinuate itself into local election offices and kind of take over the running of the on-the-ground realities of the election from within these local election offices, that even though a lot of the people that work there have their own partisan leanings and whatnot, the vast majority of them are serious professionals who try and do the best job that they can. But the activists who came along with CTCL money were not so objectively inclined.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I have to get your reaction to Peppermint Patty, who was at the podium, who was explaining why, high gas prices, Boris, it's not a problem everywhere, really. Cut 5.
For a range of issues, and we should talk about those, that the American people are, of course, impacted by rising prices of gas in some parts of the country, not all.
Well, Boris, it's okay then, because it's only some parts of the country. Which parts of the country, Boris?
Oh, yeah. So there's that 50. Remember, Obama thought there was like 62 states. So it's probably those 12 states or whatever it was. Those are the parts of the country they're referring to.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go.
Trending now on the
every time you fall.
Every time I take one step forward.
When Wright came in this morning, he wants to fight you.
No one expected this out of him.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Sad news during the break. Former Secretary of State, former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, former National Security Advisor Colin Powell died at the age of 84 from complications from COVID. His family announced 15 minutes ago. Under his Twitter account is the message. General Colin L. Powell, former U.S. Secretary of State and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, passed away this morning due to complications from COVID-19. He was fully vaccinated. We want to thank the medical staff at Walter Reed National Medical Center for their caring treatment. We've lost a remarkable and loving husband, father, grandfather, and great American, the Powell family. Indeed, he was a great American, and for a number of reasons, I am most impressed with his 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. Yes, I know he's a White House fellow, Deputy National Security Advisor, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, first African-American Secretary of State, and a very good Secretary of State, helped lead us through 9/11 as Secretary of State to George W. Bush. And General Powell was a great American. I met him only in green room. I remember the last time at the Meet the Press green room, where he walked into the room and everybody stood up. There are very few places in America where someone walks into a green room and everybody stands up. Everybody stands up for Colin Powell. I've been a guest on this show. I don't have the tape handy of that. I can't recall when that was. I think it was during the campaign of 2000 when we started this show. General Powell, just a great American. His loss is a reminder to everyone that COVID, as you are older and have comorbidities, you just have to be careful, even if you're fully vaccinated. You got to stay in shape. If you're older and you have comorbidities, just be very, very careful. You can't live your life in isolation. But General Powell, his last public service is to, in fact, allow his family to be so forthright about the cause of his death, which is COVID. And our hearts are heavy for that family and prayers for all of those involved. Let me also tell you that he would have been greatly concerned about the lead story of the day, which is the firing by China of a hypersonic missile in August off of a Long March rocket in space. They shot a Long March. We all know that the Chinese go back and forth to space all the time. They sent one of their major rocket boosters into the United States, into space in the summer, and it orbited the entire planet, including over the U.S. And it allowed a glide vehicle to depart from it, a hypersonic missile, moving at 5 times the speed of sound, which completed the circuit, was under the control of individuals in the People's Republic of China, and landed within 24 miles of its intended target, which I assume is either somewhere in the Pacific or somewhere in the vast desert of China, because they're not going to risk hitting anybody. It wasn't armed, but it is nuclear capable. And so overnight in the United States, we find ourselves on the wrong end of a competition with a communist power. It is a Sputnik moment. And if you want to learn what hypersonics mean and why they are so difficult to defend against and why they are game changers in favor of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and General Secretary Xi, go to your Google machine and type in Sputnik moment, Jerry Hendricks, Hendrix, Hudson Institute. He wrote a very long paper a year ago on hypersonics and the threat that they would pose to the United States if we fell behind in this competition, and we are behind in this competition. Now, I know, because I talked to the head of Boeing Government Affairs about this, they have many different hypersonics under development, and other companies have hypersonics under development. It was President Trump who largely, with the push from Robert O'Brien and Mike Pompeo to a reluctant Department of Defense, that demanded that our hypersonic investment, research, and development accelerate in the last 2 years of the Trump administration. And it did, and there are 7 different American hypersonic missiles in production today, but none have as yet orbited the globe. None as yet posed and deployed in the way that China appears poised and ready to deploy hypersonics in space. And if you want to know why President Trump wanted to stand up a space command, because the only way to stop things in space is to have things in space, or as Ambassador Michael Oren pointed out on this show last week when hypersonics came up, to develop concentrated energy weapons capable of hitting as many missiles as are thrown long before they begin to approach the United States. It's a very dire situation. And as Democrats gridlock on how to waste $1.5 trillion, maybe they could spend it on the Columbia-class deterrent-keeping submarines that we need, a dozen of them. One of them armed with nuclear-tipped cruise missiles, preferably hypersonics. Maybe they might want to go and do that. It's a Sputnik moment, and the Democrats don't care. Coming back with Bret Baier on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Stay tuned.
Now.
We'll see one young lady identify as transgender, and the next thing you know, 6 or 7 young ladies in that same school are now identifying as transgender.
Children taught at age 5 they can create their gender identity, and it's being celebrated.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Every cell of their body that has a nucleus is male or female.
We've now seen parents losing custody of their children if they don't go along with this.
We've all been created XY or XX, so that means there's only 2 genders. And so really the battle is against the creator.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
But can you share with us an overview of how Mark Zuckerberg and his wife directed literally hundreds of millions, I think $419 million into communities, into areas that Biden really needed, and how that plays out?
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, donated out of their own personal resources, not through they have a private foundation that they normally would do something like this through, but they went through they use their own private resources, and they funneled those resources into a little sleepy Chicago-based nonprofit called Center for Technology and Civic Life. This had nothing to do with conventional campaign finance, like a donation to the DNC to blanket the airwaves with a pro-Democrat Party message. This was money that was funneled through this little 501c3, which is supposed to be nonpartisan organization, directly into the election process. It's as if the DNC was somehow able to insinuate itself into local election offices and kind of take over the running of the on-the-ground realities of the election from within these local election offices, that even though a lot of the people that work there have their own partisan leanings and whatnot, the vast majority of them are serious professionals who try and do the best job that they can. But the activists who came along with CTCL money were not so objectively inclined.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at Rumble. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Have to get your reaction to Peppermint Patty, who was at the podium, who was explaining why, high gas prices, Boris, it's not a problem everywhere, really. Cut 5.
For a range of issues, and we should talk about those, that the American people are, of course, impacted by rising prices of gas in some parts of the country, not all.
Well, Boris, it's okay then, because it's only some parts of the country. Which parts of the country, Boris?
Oh, yeah. So there's that 50. Remember, Obama thought there was like 62 states. So it's probably those 12 states or whatever it was. Those are the parts of the country they're referring to.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
These powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Joe Rogan is a good man. Joe Rogan's a fun person. I don't agree with him on everything. I have to say this every time because I get these emails from people. Charlie, how dare you? Like, what are you, Greta Thunberg? Look, Joe Rogan has a different worldview on certain things, but he loves freedom and he loves his country. He's willing to speak out about it. He has been phenomenal on the lockdowns, on the vaccine, on masks. I had a chance to meet Joe Rogan about a month ago in Los Angeles. And Joe Rogan, right when I met him, we posted it on Instagram, and the picture we said has ivermectin boys, and it went totally viral because you're not allowed to say that. And so Joe Rogan, of course, took ivermectin after getting the Fauci virus and made a rapid turnaround.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Look for Salem now in the App Store.
Report each night in your living room. He's also the author of this brand new book, To Rescue the Republic. Ulysses S. Grant, The Fragile Union and the Crisis of 1876, which I absolutely inhaled. Good morning, Bret. How are you?
Hey, Hugh. Good morning.
It is ironic this morning that we're talking about Grant when news breaks of the loss of another commander of the American forces a long time ago, Ulysses S. Grant. We're talking about this tonight. But Colin Powell passed away this morning. I'm sure that you, like I, met him around Washington, D.C., but it's just interesting. You think he was commander of all American forces when we invaded Iraq in 1991, as Grant was when he took over the Union forces in 1863.
Yeah, it's a big loss. I exchanged emails with Michael Powell, who's a friend of mine, Colin's son, and it's tough for the family. Happened suddenly because of COVID complications, and he was vaccinated twice, and both he and his wife got COVID. She's doing fine, but just looking at his life, you think of a career of a military man who is then thrust into the middle of politics as Secretary of State. But you think of his time in the consequential moments of what we went through in the Gulf War, in the lead up to 9/11 and into 9/11 in Iraq. He was a big figure, obviously the youngest National Security Advisor ever, the first black Secretary of State, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and a substantial figure in our history.
I do remember, I was reading about Grant and Stanton, which is at the end of your book, when he is working with Stanton to sort of stop Andrew Johnson, the out-of-control president, from firing Edward Stanton, the Secretary of War. It doesn't work, but Grant is in there and fills the gap. I was reminded when I got the news this morning of Dick Cheney and Colin Powell in 1991. I'm old enough to remember this very clearly. They were very, very instrumental in building America's confidence. I even started my radio career that year, and Americans thought we were going to lose thousands and thousands of American boys in the invasion of Iraq in 1991. Not many people know that, but Colin Powell stood there with Dick Cheney and reassured the country that George H.W. Bush's command would be carried out, in the way that Grant reassured the country when he took over.
No, you're right. And he had that calming kind of leadership tone. It was a little Grant-like in that, but he was far more the center of the spotlight. He, after the Gulf War, is seen to skyrocket. He's talked about, whispered about as a presidential candidate. Colin Powell was, never chose to do it. He said his wife didn't ever want him to do it. And obviously, in the Iraq War, calls it a blot on his record that time testifying before the UN General Assembly, UN Security Council rather, about making the case for war on WMD. I think Grant he was a leader that was never a flashy, outward talking kind of guy. He was a leader by action, and his military record really led his entire career.
Great personal valor by both of them. Colin Powell received the Soldier's Medal for during his second tour in Vietnam, rescuing a general, a future general officer, and 2 others single-handedly from a burning helicopter. Ulysses Grant in the invasion of Mexico, himself leading the Bell Tower assault, and another case riding his incredible equestrian skills out of a surrounded part. Both of these men had extraordinary physical courage, which you go to great pains to talk about and to rescue the Republic. Generals these days don't often get that experience as a general as Grant did. I mean, bullets flying by him at Shiloh. It's pretty hard to miss this.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously his close confidant, Sherman, was with him along the way. And there is that great moment where Shiloh, after they've really taken massive losses and the fields are running with blood, and Sherman is ready to retreat. He's ready to call in, throw the white flag, but he sees in Grant's face this determination. And he says, well, we really took it there. And he said, yep, we'll lick them tomorrow.
That is my favorite Grant quote, by the way. There's a family connection. The fishing Mrs. Hewitt's great-grandfather, once more, was the general who screwed up the message to General Buell to come forward. And so we're glad that they licked him the next day. So we're very glad about that. Let me begin, Bret. Tonight at the Nixon Library, I want to focus on the presidency and the Reconstruction. Because what I think you did here to rescue the Republic is truly necessary for our times, to understand what we tried to do in Reconstruction and where we failed and how it wasn't Grant's fault. And had he been allowed to succeed, had Andrew Johnson not been in the way, the Freedmen's Bureau might have actually altered the course of Reconstruction. But Grant did everything he could, and he did rescue the Republic. You spent a lot more time on the crisis of 1876 than even Ron Chernow did. And I actually didn't know this much. I've been teaching con law for that long, but 1876 was always this wild, very arcane, very complicated story, which you very painstakingly spelled out. We'll talk about that tonight. How long did it take you to get control of the details of that? Because it's complicated.
Yeah. So about, a year and a half, I've got this great research team, Sidney Soderberg and co-authors Catherine Whitney, and we have this kind of team effort. We sent Sidney to various libraries, and she has this innate ability to dig out real true nuggets, and piecing that all together like a quilt from the various narratives at the time and what was written of it, you had to really get into it. It's what I tell people is that it's readable history. It's not, you're not slogging through it. It is we're hoping to have you live in it, and it's the 1876 part is really important. As I'm writing the end of this book, obviously the Capitol riot happens, and that gives you a different perspective about how things in a contested election could have gone. We, at that point, at 1876, are on the cusp, Hugh, of falling back into a civil war, and it is really present. The violence has increased, and that grand bargain, that Grant strikes, is one in which, had he not, we don't know what would have happened.
Now, the difference, of course, is Grant wasn't on the ballot in 1876. But I am reminded, my friend John Eastman wrote the very controversial memo, the full memo, not the excerpted one, that laid out options that I don't believe John was correct in listing an option to overrule the act. I didn't think it was unconstitutional under the 12th Amendment that existed. But that act was passed, the one that Eastman was interpreting, because of the 12th Amendment conflict and these competing slates of electors. We'll get into that tonight. And I want to promise everyone, if you don't understand what happened in 1876, if you read Bret's book, To Rescue the Republic, you will. But I want to start with what you necessarily do. A lot of people won't begin Ron Chernow's book, Bret. It's just too damn big. I mean, I did. I listened to it. But all I do is walk and trundle during the shutdown, and you managed to fly through this. I inhaled it, and I want to start with, of course, he is from Ohio. And just let everyone know that no Ohio, no Union. So is Sherman, by the way. And write that down. But he's a great horseman, and you picked that up from page 18 forward. The man was born to ride.
He really was. He didn't want to be a soldier. He had no interest really in following his father in the tanning business, the leather business, but he really didn't want to be a soldier either. But his father said, "You are going to West Point," and he says, "I'm not going to go." And his protests are kind of short-lived. His father said he would go, and so he did. They get the appointment, and not a great start at West Point. He arrives and his name's been recorded wrong. Explained to the registrar that his name was not Ulysses S. Grant, it was Hiram Ulysses Grant, and he was told that admission could only be given to the recorded name, so he became Ulysses S. Grant from then on.
And I love the fact that he went with it. I also want every young person listening to know that on page 23 of To Rescue the Republic, you're going to find out that Ulysses S. Grant arrives at West Point. He is 5'1" and weighs 117 pounds, and he goes on to become one of the great men of the 5'1", 117, Bret. That's not
small.
as heavy as your golf bag.
That's exactly right. He was small, and he was not impressive. He was not gifted in military skills. I think he was 21st in a class of 39. He was notorious for demerits. He had like 59 in his first year and 67 in his second, 66 in his third. But as you mentioned, he was an impressive horseman, and he really turned out to be really good at being a soldier. And the Mexican-American War is the place where he shines.
Yeah, I had General McChrystal on last week about his new book, and he said to me, and it's in that book, that everyone wants to go to war once. And Grant, in fact, you quote him on page 37, writing to Julia, there is no great sport in having bullets fly about one in every direction. He wasn't in any way naive about how butchery took place in the Civil War battlefields and how awful it is to go to war.
Yeah, I had the real realization of that, and then going through the Civil War and seeing that just massive loss of life, and guys fighting for him, going down on the battlefield, it affects him deeply to the point where he knows the one thing that he wants to do more than anything else is keep the Union together so that doesn't happen again.
I'm struck by an anecdote, which is in To Rescue the Republic, that I don't recall from Ron Chernow. His weeping at the news that one of his young proteges, he and Sherman were raising up someone who they thought could succeed him, this young general was killed in I believe, the Sherman campaign while he was around Petersburg, if I recall. And he wept. And I think it's interesting for people to realize that these men of war are nevertheless still fellow friends with the warriors both across the line in the Civil War and on their side.
Yeah, and he wrote a letter to the family, and the mother recalls that, in it, he said that he wept for him, and it affected both of them because they did think that Sherman and Grant, that this young up-and-comer was going to be their heir.
Very quickly before the break, and then we'll come back and talk about the lost years after that. In Mexico, in the Mexican War, Zachary Taylor has an enormous impact, and you record it. Can you describe the audience what Zachary Taylor meant to Grant?
Well, Grant, he was basically the best possible teacher. Both Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott become these mentors for Grant, and they enable Grant to see what leadership looks like. And because of Grant's exploits, and you mentioned the church tower and thinking outside the box, Zachary Taylor enables him to see what leadership looks like.
When we come back, I'm going to talk with Bret Baier about To Rescue the Republic. There is an entire segment called The Lost Years, where he goes around the country as a young Army officer to the worst places in the world to get sent, and he endures, and he hits bottom, by the way. You'll be inspired by this. If you want tickets to come tonight, you head over to, just Google Nixon Foundation, Bret Baier. I'll be interviewing him tonight at 7 p.m., and he'll be signing books after our conversation on stage. Don't forget as well, head over to relieffactor.com. Relieffactor.com, $19.95 gets you started on the program that gets me out there walking. The reason I was able to listen to Ron Chernow's book is all I do is walk and trundle around Virginia and the mall for hours and hours, because when everything was shut down last year, what else were you going to do except listen to long books? I just downloaded Norman Davies' Europe yesterday because that's what I need. I need long books. I read books like this, To Rescue the Republic. I read books like this because I want to be able to interview the author and I need an annotated copy. But I take books like Ron Chernow's and I listen to them. But you will want to read To Rescue the Republic. When I come back from break, we'll continue to talk about the lost years. In the meantime, if you want to be there tonight, head over to Google and just put in Bret Baier, Baier. and Hugh Hewitt Nixon Foundation. You'll find how you get yourself a ticket to tonight's event. It's going to be an interesting conversation. I'll be right back with Bret Baier in the final segment of today's Hugh Hewitt Show.
TheSalemNow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Why don't we talk about Southwest Airlines, which has been in the news very recently.
Basically, Southwest had to cancel over 1,000 flights, and they claimed initially that it was for the weather. And a lot of them were actually out of Florida. And ironically, I was actually out speaking at a conference in Miami, and it was beautiful weather when I flew out on Sunday. So this was, of course, not weather related. They're trying to claim that it wasn't for pushing back against the vaccine mandates. But what a lot of people are speculating, and what I think there is some merit to, is that there is a group now of pilots who are saying we are refusing to be coerced by our employer to take the vaccine. And in fact, the Union of Southwest Pilots has filed a lawsuit in the Federal District of Texas. What's interesting, Eric, is that traditionally conservatives have been kind of anti-union for a lot of really good reasons.
Oh, yeah.
And to say that, we are coerced into having to give union dues, and then they, of course, funnel those dues to Democrat candidates or things like that. But this shows the power of collective bargaining. This group of pilots is now pushing back and saying we will not be coerced by our employer into unilaterally modifying our employment conditions to take a vaccine that could, by the way, have a lot of negative influence. I mean, there was a friend of mine who was even saying the other day that a friend of his, who is a pilot for a different carrier, has some anecdotal evidence to say that there have been some pilots who have had blood clots or, the myocarditis, other things at altitude. And so there are a lot of pilots that are very concerned about that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
It was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build a superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, talking this morning with Bret Baier, host of Fox News Special Report. He will be originating his broadcast tonight from the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, because after that broadcast, I'll be interviewing Bret for a live audience, and he will be signing his book, To Rescue the Republic, which is #1 at Amazon.com, and I think will stay there for a long time. It's interesting, Bret. Colin Powell, who passed away this morning, often said that but for his White House fellowship under Richard Nixon, the opportunities he enjoyed would never have come his way. And you are originating the broadcast, I think, from the Nixon Library tonight. And I'm sure the staff will have available for you the picture of him with RN in the Oval when he was a White House fellow. But the intersection of all these paths is interesting to me. I want to go back to your book and to what I thought was the most trenchant observation in To Rescue the Republic before the 1876 crisis. Why did he stay in the Army? because he never thought he was going to stay in the Army. And you write on page 49, maybe it was simply the awareness growing in him during the long days and nights of the war that this was something he was good at, the Mexican War. He had the nerves for it, the temperament. You know what that reminded me of, Bret? Jim Mattis said the same thing in his memoir. I interviewed him at the Nixon Library. General Mattis said he always intended to get out as soon as his enlistment was up. And then something would come along and he would stay in. And Grant didn't stay in the whole time. But you're right. He had the temperament for war, an unflappability, an iron will.
Yeah. He was kind of unshakable. And he was meant for that. And, he never really aspired to be a politician or a political figure. Even before the end of the war, he's such a popular figure that people are constantly trying to persuade him to run for president. And he assures them that he has no interest. Says something like, I never aspired but to one office in my life, and he said I wanted to be mayor of Galena, the Illinois town where he lived, to build a sidewalk from his house to the depot. And after the war, he returns to Galena, and he's greeted with all these people coming out, and they have a big sign that says, General, the sidewalk is built.
Yeah. Even in America, it impresses me at this remove that a man could come from such straitened circumstances to become president, rescue the Republic, as you point out, and to rescue the Republic 3 times, then goes across Europe for 2.5 years and is feted by everyone from Queen Victoria to the Tsar. What a trip that is. But if I can talk about an earlier trip, you have a section in To Rescue the Republic. I think I've said To Rescue the Republic 7 times. Frank Luntz says, unless you say the title of the book 7 times, people don't remember it, but it's doing so well at Amazon, I don't think people are going to forget Bret Baier and To Rescue the Republic. The Lost Years. He went to the worst place. He went to Detroit, which is the worst place in the world. I'm from Ohio, so we know that. Then he went to Sackett's Harbor. Then he went, just god-awful places on the West Coast, which there was nothing going on, and he drank a bit. And you don't shy away from that. But when he got done on the West Coast, he was done in.
Yep. It was really the most tortured time of his life. It's this long separation from his family. He's sent to the Northwest. He's isolated at an isolated fort. He's lonely and bored, and he falls into depression. And he writes Julia, his wife, and how he says he's forsaken there. And he's given to bouts of depression. He does what soldiers did at some times. He drank heavily. And when his commander finds him one day, he orders Grant, he's drunk, he orders him to resign or face court-martial. And his friends want him to stand trial, thinking that he can get acquitted, but he resigns his commission and heads home. Dismal failure at farming, dismal failure at business, and he's at the lowest point in his life. He's selling firewood in Illinois, and 3 years later would be commanding all of the Union forces.
You do not belabor the problem with drink, which would occasionally burden even his war years. You don't belabor it, and I'm glad you didn't. But you do talk very bluntly about his attitudes towards slavery. He was never an abolitionist, but when his father-in-law, Julia was a Southerner, she was served by the enslaved for many years. When his father gifts him an enslaved man, Grant frees him fairly quickly. I don't know how long it was, but he's just not comfortable being an owner of another human being. And he became rather settled in his abolitionist ways as the war progressed. Well done.
Yeah, even more so. He was kind of siding at most times as president with the radical Republicans, as they were called. And you forget that this 8-year presidency, we just don't talk about it that much. And yes, there was some petty corruption within his administration. Yes, he trusted people that tried to make money off of him. But his big role is to win the peace, and in particular to make sure the process of Reconstruction is successful. And he does really everything in his power to do that. He's, blacks were voting for the first time. The 14th, 15th Amendments are pushed through. They're serving in Congress, in the U.S. Senate, own farms, making their own livings. And, I think that it's hard to imagine that effort by a president, sending federal troops after the Ku Klux Klan in the South, and he thinks that he wants to push Lincoln's vision forward.
Thank you for listening today. Make sure you'll be back tomorrow. I am Hugh Hewitt. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dwayne. I'll see you tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show. Thank you for listening today. Make sure you'll be back tomorrow. I am Hugh Hewitt. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dwayne. I'll see you tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.